This is the summary of All the Light We Cannot See, summarized by Cellwave Audio and narrated by Archies. About the author. Anthony Doerr is an American author, celebrated for his lyrical prose and profound exploration of human endurance. Born in Cleveland, Ohio in 1973, he developed an early fascination with nature, light, and the intricate patterns of life, themes that would later weave through all his works. A graduate of Bowdoin College and Bowling Green State University, Doerr began his career with short stories that earned him critical acclaim for their elegance and emotional precision. His first collection, The Shell Collector, set in far-flung corners of the world, revealed a writer deeply attuned to the beauty and fragility of existence. He followed this success with About Grace and Memory Wall, each reaffirming his gift for merging scientific curiosity with poetic sensitivity. But it was All the Light We Cannot See, published in 2014, that brought him international recognition. The novel won the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction in 2015, became a New York Times bestseller, and touched millions with its portrayal of two young lives intertwined by the devastation of World War II. Doerr spent 10 years crafting the book, balancing meticulous historical research with the emotional depth that defines his storytelling. His later novel, Cloud Cuckoo Land 2021, continued his exploration of time, imagination, and the endurance of stories, earning him another National Book Award nomination. Beyond his novels, Doerr's essays and columns reveal a man captivated by wonder, whether describing snowfall, memory, or the invisible forces connecting people across generations. He lives in Boise, Idaho with his wife and twin sons, where he continues to write with a sense of awe for the natural world. Doerr's work reminds readers that beauty persists even amid destruction, and that light, seen or unseen, always finds its way through. Introduction. Awe has a way of magnifying the smallest details of human life, a whisper, a heartbeat, a fleeting beam of light cutting through darkness. All the Light We Cannot See captures that fragile brilliance, following two young souls whose lives, though separated by countries and ideologies, converge in the ruins of war-torn France. Marie Laure Leblanc, a blind French girl guided by sound and memory, learns to navigate the world through the steady rhythm of her father's love and the architecture of miniature models he builds to help her find her way. Across the border, Werner, an orphan in Germany, discovers a gift for engineering that propels him into the machinery of Hitler's army. Each child is caught between innocence and destruction, forced to make impossible choices as the world around them unravels. Anthony Doerr weaves their stories through shifting timelines, from the peaceful curiosity of childhood to the thunder of falling bombs, revealing how light can endure even in the darkest moments. Through the hum of radios, the scent of salt air, and the echo of distant footsteps, the novel becomes a meditation on the unseen connections that hold humanity together. Every sound, every signal transmitted across miles carries the same longing, to be heard, to be understood, to survive. This is a story about resilience and the quiet defiance of beauty amid chaos. In the fog of war, when morality blurs and hope flickers faintly, Marie Laure and Werner become mirrors of one another, both searching for meaning in a world determined to erase it. Their paths remind us that even when sight is lost, even when faith trembles, there remains light, the kind we cannot see yet feel deeply within. Disclaimer. This is an unofficial summary and analysis of All the Light We Cannot See, a novel by Anthony Doerr. It is not the original book, and is not affiliated with or authorized by the author or publisher. This work is intended to provide key insights, analysis, and commentary for educational and informational purposes only. All names, trademarks, and references to the original content remain the property of their respective owners. Every effort has been made to ensure fair use under Section 107 of the Copyright Act. Readers are encouraged to purchase the original book from the author or publisher for the full experience and context. Part 0, the 7th of August 1944. The air over St. Malo trembles with the drone of distant engines long before the bombs begin to fall. On this August morning in 1944, the city is wrapped in a haze of sea salt and dread. From the sky, thin white papers spiral downward, leaflets scattered like feathers, warning civilians to leave the city before the Allies strike. Most are too afraid or too stubborn to go. They hide behind walls built centuries ago, believing the stone will protect them. The tide presses against the shore, the gulls cry over the ramparts, and the hum of approaching war grows louder. Inside a small house at number 4 Rue Vaubourg, a blind girl named Marie Laure LeBlanc presses her ear to the silence. She can smell the smoke in the wind, faint but creeping closer. Each sound becomes a landmark, the whisper of curtains, the ticking of the miniature model of the city her father once made for her. Every corner of the house is memorized in her mind. Her father, Daniel, was once the locksmith of the Muséum National d'Histoire Naturelle in Paris, and when they fled the Germans years ago, he taught her to see with her fingers. Now those fingers guide her through a home that has become a fortress and a prison all at once. Her great-uncle Etienne, who owns the house, is nowhere to be found. His fragile heart and memories of the Great War have sent him into hiding, leaving Marie Laure alone with rationed food and fear. Outside, the world burns brighter than she can imagine. The leaflets flutter past the rooftops, warning of what's coming. Allied bombers, heavy and relentless, circling like hawks above prey. The city of St. Malo, with its narrow streets, stone towers and winding alleys, becomes a labyrinth of echoes. Marie Laure cannot see it, but she feels the vibration of engines through the floorboards. She opens a tin of food, eats sparingly, then shuts herself in a closet under the stairs, clutching a small key. Somewhere in her mind, her father's voice murmurs instructions: count steps, stay calm, trust the model. She traces the shape of the miniature St. Malo in her imagination, finding comfort in what she knows by touch. Far below the city, in the ruins of a bombed-out hotel, a young German soldier named Werner opens his eyes to darkness. Dust fills his throat. The air is heavy with plaster, wood, and the sharp scent of explosives. His head throbs. A beam of faint light filters through a crack in the ceiling, revealing a tangle of broken pipes and bricks. He lies in a cellar, trapped beneath the rubble, the only survivor of his unit. His radio, once his lifeline to the world, lies half buried beside him. Werner has always been small for his age, his white blonde hair and pale skin giving him a ghostly look, but his mind is sharp, the mind of an engineer, a problem solver. He was raised in an orphanage in Germany with his sister, Jutta, where the only thing that lifted him beyond the greyness of their lives was a broken radio he learned to fix. Through it he once heard voices in the night, lectures about science, morality and light, the same broadcasts that had unknowingly connected him to Marie Laure's uncle, Etienne. Now, as the ceiling groans above him, he strains to hear anything but the ringing in his ears. He calls out, but the sound goes nowhere. The hotel above him, the Hotel of Bees, was once beautiful, filled with carvings of honeycombs and hives. Now it's nothing but ash and echo. Werner tries to stand, but his leg gives out. He finds his radio and brushes away the dust, checking the wires by feel. His hands tremble. The static is faint but alive. Somewhere amid the chaos, he hears the crackle of a frequency. It reminds him of the orphanage, of the way he and Jutta huddled together, dreaming of the vastness of the world, of light that travels invisible through the air, connecting people who will never meet. Above ground, St. Malo braces itself. The bombers pass overhead in rhythmic waves, their shadows sweeping across the sea. Marie Laure hears the sound and counts each pulse as though it were her own heartbeat. She feels the vibration through the soles of her shoes and presses her palms over her ears, but even then the sound seeps in through her bones. She remembers her father telling her stories of invisible threads that bind everything together: sound, radio, love, things that exist but cannot be seen. The words come back to her now, as though whispered through the walls. In the cellar, Werner's world shrinks to the dim glow of his radio dial. He adjusts the knobs, desperate to find a signal. Between bursts of static, a soft voice flickers, a woman's, fragile and steady. He can't make out the words, but the rhythm is like music, carrying through the ruins. He leans closer, holding his breath. For a moment, the fear ebbs away. The sound reminds him of all that still exists beyond this tomb of dust and rock. Marie Laure sits by the window, counting the seconds between explosions. The bombs haven't fallen yet, but the air feels swollen with energy, the kind that precedes disaster. Her fingertips glide across the small wooden model of St. Malo that her father built, every street, every alley carved in perfect miniature. It's her map, her compass, her way to survive. She traces the path from Rue Vaubourel to the sea. The model reminds her of him, the way he smelled of sawdust and salt, the patience in his hands as he worked. When the Germans took him away, he promised he would return. Years have passed, and the promise has become a memory she keeps alive through touch. As night falls, the first bombs descend. The walls quiver. Windows shatter. The city exhales a scream that she cannot see but feels in her bones. She crawls toward the hidden passage her uncle showed her long ago, the one behind the wardrobe. Inside, the space is narrow and cold, filled with dust and the scent of old paper. She brings her loaf of bread, a can of food, a jug of water, and the tiny model house. In her pocket rests the sea of flames, the legendary diamond her father once guarded, said to curse its keeper with eternal life and sorrow. She doesn't know if the curse is real, but it weighs on her like fate. Werner, half conscious beneath the debris, feels the earth shake. The blast above sends a rain of dust across his face. He shields his head and prays that the ceiling holds. His radio crackles again, faint voices in French, the hum of music, the sound of someone breathing. He can't tell if it's real or a ghost of transmission. Every noise feels like a lifeline. He imagines the people above, running through the streets, clutching children searching for shelter. He imagines Jutta at home, listening to a broadcast about the war, wondering if he's still alive. The guilt presses on him like the rubble itself. In different corners of the same city, the girl and the boy exist in parallel silence, both blind in their own way. The bombs have not yet reached their peak, but the night carries their promise. Marie Laure steadies her breathing, counting each inhale, each exhale, as her father taught her. Werner keeps his fingers on the radio dial, trying to hold the signal as though it were a heartbeat. Above them, the sky burns. Beneath them, the earth holds its breath. And in that suspended moment before fire reigns and the city falls, two lives separated by belief and circumstance drift closer through unseen waves of sound. Neither knows the other exists. Yet the same light, invisible but enduring, touches them both. Night settled over St. Malo like a shroud. The ocean wind carries ash, dust, and the faintest trace of salt. The leaflets that had fallen earlier now lie soaked against cobblestones, unread and useless. The city, wrapped in its medieval walls, burns from within. Fires roar across the rooftops, casting orange reflections in shattered glass. Somewhere in the maze of streets, Marie Laure Leblanc crouches in the darkness of number 4 Rue Vaubourel, blind but alert to every vibration. The blasts come closer now, one then another, until the very air seems to split apart. Her hands shake as she feels her way along the wall, remembering her father's voice, "Find your bearings. Trust your memory." Each explosion rearranges her world. The model of St. Malo that her father carved in wood has taught her every street and turning, yet nothing could prepare her for this chaos. She counts as she moves, steps, breaths, walls, the sounds of the house around her. Glass rains down from above. Somewhere upstairs a windowpane bursts, and the smell of smoke floods the room. The air grows thick and her lungs strain. She retreats toward the back of the house, searching for safety in the narrow cupboard behind the wardrobe, the same hidden place her great-uncle Etienne once used to store his forbidden radio. The walls here are lined with books, the floor cold against her knees. She closes the door, sealing herself into darkness. From this small refuge she can hear the outside world collapsing. The whine of a descending bomb grows louder, then disappears into a deafening crash. Stone screams as it breaks. She presses her palms against her ears, but the sound lives inside her now, reverberating through her ribs. Beneath the thunder she hears smaller noises, the crackle of fire, the groan of the house, the whisper of falling plaster. Everything she has known becomes sound and scent, burning wood, hot iron, and the faint sweetness of the sea beyond the flames. She thinks of her father in Paris, of the museum where he once worked, of the tiny perfect keys he made. She wonders if he would know what to do now, if he would tell her to stay or to run. But there is nowhere to run. Far below, in the cellar of the Hotel of Bees, Werner Pfennig wakes again to a cough that tears through his chest. The dust has thickened. The air feels alive with static. His leg throbs from where debris pinned him, but he has managed to clear a small space around the radio. Its casing is cracked, wires exposed, but it still hums faintly, a heartbeat of current. He turns the knobs with trembling fingers, coaxing the signal through layers of interference. He hears French words, then static, then a thin melody. The song seems to drift through stone, fragile but persistent, as though carried by memory itself. He thinks of Jutta, his sister back in Germany, who used to beg him to stop listening to forbidden frequencies. She would tell him that those foreign voices could get them both punished, that nothing good came from what the Reich called disobedience. But Werner could never stop. The voices that spoke of science, imagination, and light had felt like windows in a locked room. Now, trapped beneath a mountain of ruins, he clings to those same invisible waves. He wonders if the broadcast he hears now, the faint voice, the echo of words he can't quite translate, belongs to the same man who once spoke of wonder to children across Europe. He doesn't know that voice once came from Etienne, Marie Laure's great-uncle, recorded years before the war began. Above him, the bombing intensifies. Flames crawl up the walls of the old city. The Allies are cutting off the Germans who refuse to surrender, flattening the ancient streets one by one. Werner grips the radio tighter as the ceiling groans. Each blast sends dust spiraling through the narrow beam of light that pierces the cracks. He feels the weight of everything, his uniform, his orders, his guilt, pressing against him. For the first time, the war he has served feels like a machine too big and senseless to belong to humans. He wonders if the people above are alive, if they are running or praying or simply waiting to die. Marie Laure sits in the darkness, listening to the building around her shift and breathe like a wounded animal. Her fingers find the can of food, the water jug, the loaf of bread she has hidden. She forces herself to eat, to swallow, to stay alert. Every few minutes, she reaches for the small wooden house her father carved, a replica of this very building, and traces the path through its miniature rooms. It steadies her. Then she remembers the stone, the sea of flames. Hidden deep within the house, wrapped in a small cloth pouch, it rests near her. Her father told her the legend long ago, that the stone grants eternal life to its keeper but curses those they love. The story feels childish now, yet part of her cannot let go of the fear that it might be true. So much has been lost already. Perhaps it is the stone's fault. Perhaps she is still alive because of it. A distant rumble draws her attention. She feels it first, a tremor through the floor, then hears the slow collapse of a wall somewhere nearby. Bricks strike bricks and then silence follows. She wants to cry out for her uncle, but she knows sound could bring soldiers or worse. Instead, she whispers to herself, naming each object she touches, the way she did when learning to walk through the museum in Paris: chair, wall, book, bread, key. The words ground her in the present. They remind her she is still here, still breathing, still herself. Werner, in the cellar, loses consciousness for a while. When he wakes, hours have passed. His throat is raw, his hands scraped and bleeding. He tries the radio again. The battery is dying, but the faint voice remains. This time it is clearer, a girl's voice, almost a whisper, reading something that sounds like a story. He leans closer. It is a children's tale, or part of one, about the sea and a jewel that brings both fortune and misfortune. He cannot understand every word, but the rhythm is soothing, like listening to a lullaby. He pictures her somewhere above him, reading into the darkness, unaware that anyone is listening. The fire outside moves like weather, unpredictable, merciless. The entire city seems to breathe smoke. When Marie Laure finally sleeps, it is not rest but exhaustion. In her dream, she walks through her father's museum again, touching glass cases that hold shells and fossils, each one a memory of the world before war. In another dream, she hears the radio, her uncle's soft voice telling her that light is always present even when unseen. Werner keeps the radio pressed against his ear until the battery fades. He cannot tell if the girl's voice is real or if it's a ghost left behind by the signal. But as the static swallows her words, something inside him shifts. For the first time since the war began, he feels not like a soldier but like a listener, a witness to something pure amid destruction. By dawn, St. Malo's half gone. Smoke rises from the harbor, buildings are reduced to skeletons. Yet inside those remains, two souls endure, one above ground, one below. Marie Laure, blind but resolute, curls up beside her water jug and whispers to herself that the sun will come again. Werner, buried in darkness, closes his eyes and repeats a line he once heard on a forbidden broadcast: "Open your eyes and see what you can with them before they close forever." Unseen to both, their worlds are inching closer. The same bombs that separated them now begin to link their fates, like threads of invisible light stretched across the ruins. And as the fires of St. Malo fade into smoke, the story of their meeting, of the girl who reads to the air and the boy who listens through stone, quietly begins. Part 1 to 1934. In 1934, Paris hums with the rhythm of a city alive. Trams clatter, pigeons scatter in the squares, and at the heart of it all stands the Muséum National de Histoire Naturelle, where Daniel Leblanc tends the locks that protect its treasures. The air inside smells of dust, varnish, and old secrets. Cabinets overflow with shells and fossils, jeweled beetles, and skeletons of ancient creatures. Here, his daughter Marie Laure grows up surrounded by wonders. She is 6 when the world begins to darken. Her vision fades slowly, colors dissolving into gray until even her own hands become shadows. The doctors call it cataracts, but their words mean little to a child who can no longer see her father's face. What she remembers is his voice, patient, tender, always explaining, always guiding. Her father refuses to let blindness trap her in darkness. He teaches her to navigate their neighborhood by touch and sound. Together they count steps from their apartment to the bakery, from the bakery to the fountain, until Marie Laure can move through the streets without fear. Every year on her birthday, Daniel builds her a puzzle box, small wooden contraptions that open only with the right sequence of movements. Solving them teaches her patience, curiosity, and confidence. The day she unlocks one by herself, her father smiles and says, "Now you can do anything." Those words stay with her even when sight does not. In the museum, life is measured in locks and keys. Daniel repairs vaults that guard priceless artifacts, while Marie Laure learns to listen to the world. She memorizes the rooms by their echoes, the high ceiling of the great gallery, the hush of the herbarium, the rhythmic tapping of her father's tools. The scientists treat her kindly, filling her pockets with fossils or seashells, describing each one in detail. When she places a shell to her ear, she imagines she can hear the ocean itself. Her world becomes one of textures, sounds, and dreams. Far away, in a grey mining town called Zollverein in Germany, another child grows up in a world of echoes. Werner Pfennig lives with his sister Jutta in a crowded orphanage, surrounded by soot and hunger. The miners return each day coated in coal dust, their eyes hollow. Werner knows this is his future, to go underground at 15, to spend his life digging in darkness. But fate, like light, finds its own path. One evening, he discovers a broken radio discarded in the street. Curious, he brings it home and pries open its casing. Inside, copper wires glint like veins. With Jutta watching, he repairs it piece by piece, until the voice of a French broadcaster hums through the static. It's the first miracle of his life. The radio becomes their window to the world. Night after night, the children huddle under a blanket, listening to a man speak softly about science, music, and the mysteries of light, how it can travel across space and time, unseen but constant. The voice sounds like hope itself, teaching them that wonder exists even in a place as small as theirs. Jutta clings to every word, but Werner's fascination runs deeper. He begins taking apart other radios, building new ones, testing circuits with the precision of a craftsman. What he doesn't realize is that his talent will one day make him valuable to those who see science as a weapon. Back in Paris, Marie Laure's days follow the rhythm of her father's devotion. Each morning he walks her to the museum, narrating everything they pass: the scent of roasting chestnuts, the rumble of carts, the flutter of pigeons. In the evenings she sits beside him while he works, tracing the shapes of gears and keys with her fingertips. When he learns that her blindness is permanent, he doesn't weep in front of her. Instead, he begins a secret project, a perfect scale model of their neighborhood, carved street by street, window by window. Once it's finished, he places it before her and says, "Now you can learn every corner. When you can find your way across this model, you'll know the real streets too." Marie Laure runs her fingers over the miniature city, mapping each building by feel. She learns every turn, every drainpipe and doorway, until she can walk the real streets unassisted. When she succeeds, the city becomes hers again, not through sight but through memory and courage. The two of them live like explorers, searching for beauty in small things. Their bond is quiet but unbreakable, a light that no blindness can extinguish. Meanwhile, in Zollverein, Werner's brilliance begins to attract attention. He repairs radios for neighbors, decoding the secrets of sound with an intuition beyond his years. His sister warns him to be careful: the Nazis are rising and curiosity can be dangerous, but he cannot stop himself. When a local official learns of his talent, Werner is summoned to fix the man's shortwave set. He does so flawlessly, and word spreads. Soon, recruiters from a Nazi training school arrive, offering him a place where his skills can serve the fatherland. The orphanage director beams with pride, but Jutta senses the cost. She begs him not to go, fearing he will lose the gentleness that defines him. Yet the temptation is too strong, an escape from the mines, from hunger, from the life that crushed their parents. The paths of the two children, one in Paris, one in Germany, begin to mirror each other. Marie Laure learns to navigate her blindness, Werner learns to navigate machines. Both discover that light, whether physical or moral, is something to be sought even when unseen. The French broadcast Werner listens to speak of peace and imagination, the same virtues Daniel tries to instill in his daughter. Though they live worlds apart, both children are shaped by sound: the hum of the radio, the echo of footsteps, the whisper of hope. As the decade moves forward, the tone of the world darkens. In Germany, banners unfurl, voices rise in unison, and children are taught to salute instead of question. Werner begins to hear new kinds of radio messages: patriotic songs, propaganda, the steady march of ideology. In France, the museum staff speak in low tones about the news from across the border. Daniel senses the shift and becomes protective, aware that the peace they've known cannot last. One evening, as the lights of Paris flicker in the distance, Daniel and Marie Laure sit by the window listening to the city's heartbeat. She asks him if the stars still shine even when clouds hide them. He tells her yes, always. "You can't see light," he says, "but you can feel it." She doesn't know then that these words will one day guide her through war and loss. In the orphanage, Werner dismantles an old receiver and builds a new one, stronger and more precise. Jutta listens beside him, her face pale in the glow of the dial. When the same French voice returns, speaking about electromagnetic waves and invisible energy, she smiles, but Werner hears something else, a calling. The man on the radio says that to understand the universe, one must learn to see what cannot be seen. Werner doesn't know it yet, but he will spend his life chasing that idea, even when it leads him into darkness. By the end of 1934, both children stand at the edge of worlds about to collapse. Marie Laure clings to her father's steady hand, as her sight fades completely. Werner tightens the last wire on his latest invention, feeling the thrill of mastery. Neither can imagine the storms that will soon bind their lives together. For now, they are simply two sparks of wonder, one guided by faith, the other by curiosity, both reaching for a light they cannot see. Paris in 1936 feels like a city breathing between wars. Marie Laure Leblanc has now lost all sight, but her father's devotion keeps her world wide and luminous. Every day she explores the miniature city he carved, her fingers gliding along its wooden streets. Once she can trace every path in the model, he leads her into the real city, guiding her hand along walls, curbs and steps until she knows every turn by heart. The streets become her own, She memorizes the number of paces between landmarks and learns to navigate with a calm confidence that astonishes strangers. To her father, she is a miracle, a child who refuses to be limited by what she has lost. At the Muséum National d'Histoire Naturelle, where her father works, life moves quietly beneath the hum of political tension. Daniel spends his days maintaining the locks that guard the museum's treasures, including a gemstone that has drawn whispers among the staff, the Sea of Flames. It is said to be a diamond of extraordinary beauty and power, blue as the ocean and the size of a pigeon's egg. The legend claims that whoever possesses it will live forever, but those they love will suffer terrible misfortune. Marie Laure hears fragments of the story and feels the chill of it. Her father dismisses it as myth, yet he treats the vault where the stone is kept with special care. The museum's director, Monsieur Leblanc's superior, ensures the gem remains hidden away, aware that in times of uncertainty even stories can be dangerous. While Marie Laure's Paris remains filled with discovery and wonder, hundreds of miles away, Werner Pfennig's Germany grows darker. The once lively voice on the radio, the French professor who spoke of curiosity and light, vanishes from the airwaves. The new voices that fill the frequencies are loud, triumphant, and terrifying. Propaganda becomes the new melody of the nation. At the orphanage in Zollverein, the older boys wear swastika armbands and chant slogans. Werner's skill with radios brings him unwanted attention. He is invited to demonstrate his inventions for visiting officers, who admire his precision and discipline. They speak to him of duty, purity, and greatness. They tell him he has been chosen for a future far beyond the mines. Werner is torn between pride and dread. Jutta, his sister, sees what he cannot, that these promises come with chains. "You have to think for yourself," she warns him, her voice trembling with fear he doesn't yet share. Werner knows she is right, but the hunger for knowledge and escape overpowers everything. The idea of leaving Zollverein for a place where his mind might matter blinds him to the truth of what he's joining. In Paris, Marie Laure's days are filled with rhythm and love. Her father's patience is endless. He carves puzzles for her, and teaches her how to open locks by listening to their clicks. When he works on the museum's mechanisms, she sits nearby, measuring the weight of keys in her small hands. In the evenings they eat bread and cheese in their tiny apartment, the smell of the Seine drifting through the window. On quiet nights they listen to Etienne, her father's reclusive uncle in St. Malo, broadcasting science programs from his attic. Marie Laure doesn't understand the words, but she feels the warmth in his voice. Werner's gift, meanwhile, lifts him out of the orphanage and into a new world. He is accepted into the National Political Institute, a Nazi training school. The letter arrives stamped with the eagle and lightning bolts, symbols of his country's new faith. Frau Elena, the caretaker who raised him, cries when she reads it aloud. Jutta refuses to celebrate. Werner promises to write, believing he can stay himself inside the system that now claims him. When he boards the train, the sound of the whistle fills him with both triumph and unease. At the school, discipline replaces childhood. The instructors test the boys' obedience with drills, beatings, and humiliation. They teach mathematics and mechanics only as tools for war. Werner excels because he must. He learns to repair transmitters, build tracking equipment, and decode messages. His intelligence earns praise, but the cost is innocence. He witnesses cruelty, classmates punished, weaker boys broken, and he learns to look away. Yet inside him, a quiet resistance flickers. Late at night he dreams of Jutta and the forbidden radio, of voices speaking about light and kindness. He begins to understand what it means to lose something more precious than freedom, the ability to question. Back in Paris, Daniel receives devastating news. Germany has invaded Poland, France prepares for war. The museum's directors gather in secret meetings, speaking of evacuation plans. If the Nazis reach Paris, the treasures must be hidden. Daniel is entrusted with a task that changes everything: to carry one of the museum's most valuable stones to safety. No one tells him if it's the real Sea of Flames or one of the decoys made to protect it. 4 identical copies are created, each given to a different courier, so that even the museum itself will not know which is authentic. Daniel hides the gem inside a small pouch and tucks it into his pocket, never mentioning it to his daughter. Soon after, sirens begin to wail through Paris. The streets fill with people fleeing the city. Marie Laure holds her father's hand as they join the exodus. They walk for miles through roads choked with carts, bicycles, and terrified families. Planes pass overhead, dropping leaflets and then bombs. Daniel shields his daughter from the noise, his hand gripping hers until his knuckles whiten. The miniature model of Paris, her most beloved treasure, is left behind. She carries only her cane and a small rucksack of food. Each night they sleep in fields or barns, the smell of hay mixed with smoke from distant fires. Marie Laure listens to the sounds of strangers crying in the dark, of boots marching far away. Daniel tries to keep her calm, describing the landscape in gentle detail, the windmills, the cows, the distant toll of church bells. He tells her that St. Malo, where her great-uncle lives, will be safe. He believes it because he must. Werner, now at the Institute, begins to see the cost of his new world. His roommate, Frederick, gentle and kind, collects birds' feathers and speaks of beauty in a place that despises it. Werner admires him but knows kindness is dangerous here. When Frederick refuses to participate in the beating of a smaller boy, he is punished mercilessly. Werner's silence haunts him, but fear keeps him obedient. He throws himself into his studies, learning how to detect radio frequencies used by enemies. The knowledge that once felt like liberation now becomes an instrument of control. Marie Laure and her father finally reach St. Malo, exhausted and hungry. The town, perched on the edge of the sea, smells of salt and fish. They find shelter in the tall, narrow house at number 4 Rue Vaubourg, home to Daniel's uncle Etienne. Etienne is kind but haunted, a man still scarred by the Great War, afraid to leave his house. He welcomes them cautiously, his voice trembling as he greets his niece for the first time. The house feels strange to Marie Laure, full of echoes and secret rooms, but it will become her refuge. Outside, the world prepares to burn again. The Germans move closer each day, their flags spreading across Europe. Daniel hides the diamond deep within the house, constructing traps and puzzles to protect it, unaware that in doing so he binds his family to its curse. Marie Laure senses that their lives have entered a new chapter, one where courage will mean more than sight, and survival will depend on remembering every sound, every step, every whisper of the sea. As they settle into St. Malo, the child who once walked the streets of Paris by touch begins to listen for something larger, a pattern, a signal, a thread of connection that will lead her through the darkness. Across borders and battle lines, Werner follows a different path, learning to hear the world through wires and static. Though they do not yet know it, both are being drawn toward each other by forces neither can name, forces as invisible and powerful as the light they cannot see. Part 2-8, August 1944. The dawn of August 8, 1944, rises red over St. Malo, a city choking on smoke and silence. Rubble spills into the streets, fires gnaw through houses that have stood for centuries. From the air, the town looks like a ruin already claimed by the sea. The Allies have pounded it through the night, believing German forces still hide within its walls. Every echo of gunfire feels amplified by the stone, turning the city into a labyrinth of flame and sound. Inside number 4 Rue Vaubourg, Marie Laure Leblanc wakes to the hollow thunder of another explosion. The sound seems to come from all directions at once, from the harbor, from the streets, from the trembling foundations beneath her feet. Her body aches from exhaustion. She has barely eaten. The walls whisper with heat, the air thick with dust. In the corner of her room stands the small wooden model of the city her father built years ago, now layered with soot. Her fingers trace it automatically, the miniature ramparts, the tower, the sea. Each touch reminds her of safety, of the world that existed before everything fell apart. Yet nothing feels the same. Her father is gone. Her uncle has vanished into the chaos. Only the model remains, a memory she can touch but never see. Outside, the world cracks open. The whine of bombers cuts through the air, followed by the deep concussion of impact. Shutters explode off their hinges. Glass shatters. The street below becomes an inferno. Marie Laure clutches the wall, pressing her palms against it to feel the tremor of each blast. The vibrations guide her more than sound now. She can tell by their rhythm how close the destruction is. Somewhere in the distance, church bells clang wildly, their metal voices fractured by the roar of fire. The heat grows unbearable. She knows she cannot stay on the lower floors, the smoke is too thick. Guided by memory, she begins to climb. Each step on the spiral staircase feels uncertain, each one accompanied by the rain of falling plaster. She counts her movements the way her father taught her, 7 steps turn, then 12 more. The cane taps the wall, measuring her progress. Her lungs burn. Somewhere beneath her, the floor creaks ominously. When she reaches the attic, the air is cooler, though filled with ash. She pushes open the narrow window to let in what little breeze remains. The sounds of St. Malo drift upward, the crackle of collapsing wood, the moan of flames feeding on oxygen. The city that once smelled of salt and bread now reeks of smoke and death. From the rooftops, the Allied shells streak across the sky, their light piercing even the darkness behind her eyes. She feels them in her bones. On the table in the attic sits the can of food she's been saving. She opens it carefully, rationing spoonfuls, forcing herself to eat. Beside it lies the small cloth-wrapped object her father once hid in her pocket, the sea of flames. She doesn't need to see it to know what it is. Its smooth, cold surface presses into her palm, heavy with meaning. He had told her to protect it, to keep it safe no matter what, though she never understood why. Now she wonders whether it is a blessing or a curse. Perhaps it has kept her alive, though everyone around her has vanished. She listens. The city is alive with pain. Every explosion feels personal, as if the bombs are searching for her. Somewhere below, in the labyrinth of rooms, she thinks she hears movement, but it could be only the wind or her mind filling the silence with ghosts. She drags a chair to the attic door and wedges it beneath the handle, sealing herself inside. Then she crawls to the far corner, near the radio that Etienne once used for his secret broadcasts. The machine sits silent, coated in dust, its dials lifeless. She runs her fingers across them and whispers to herself, "Please work." When she turns the knob, the static comes alive, faint but real. It's the first sound of connection she's heard in days. She adjusts the frequency, searching for a human voice, but only finds the hiss of broken airwaves. Still, the static comforts her. It reminds her that she is not alone, that somewhere out there, unseen, are others trying to reach through the same darkness. She begins to hum softly, the tune barely audible, like a prayer to whatever remains beyond the smoke. Hours pass in this suspended world. Light filters weakly through the window. Marie Laure dozes and wakes in fragments, never sure if it's day or night. The city's destruction continues relentlessly, each bomb closer, each rumble deeper. In her dreams she walks the streets of the miniature city her father made, but the walls crumble under her hands. She hears his voice telling her to open her eyes, to see with her mind. She wakes gasping, gripping the wooden model as though it could anchor her to life. At intervals, she forces herself to move. She crawls to the window, breathes in the salt air, and listens to the sea. Beneath the chaos, its rhythm endures, steady, eternal. The waves still crash against the ramparts, indifferent to the war consuming the city above. The sound fills her with something close to peace. She whispers aloud the words she once learned from her father's stories: the sea, always the sea. In the moments between bombings, St. Malo lies eerily still. The silence feels heavier than the explosions. Marie Laure can hear her own pulse, the creak of timber, the shifting of rubble. She imagines the streets below, the Hotel of Bees collapsing, the square where she once fed pigeons now filled with debris. She remembers the baker's shop, the smell of fresh bread, the sound of Etienne's soft laughter. Each memory feels like a thread unraveling in her hands. She returns to the radio, determined. Her fingers find the switches, her ears tuned to every flicker of sound. Finally, after hours of adjusting, she hears a faint hum, a distant transmission crackling through the static. It's too weak to understand, but it's there. A heartbeat of another voice in the ruins. She leans closer, straining to catch it. "Someone," she whispers, "please answer." Outside, the firestorm grows. The old ramparts glow red in the distance, and the roofs of nearby houses collapse under their own weight. Yet inside her attic, Marie Laure holds on to rhythm and breath, to the smallest fragments of order. She arranges her few belongings neatly, the bread, the can, the key, the sea of flames, as though the act itself can keep her sane. Every few hours she climbs to the window, counts the seconds between shell bursts and presses her ear to the wind. In her solitude, she becomes a part of the city's pulse. She senses its pain as if it were her own body, the fractured heart of St. Malo beating faintly through the smoke. And though she cannot see the flames, she feels their warmth on her skin, a reminder that she is still alive. When the next explosion rocks the street below, she does not scream. She folds her arms around herself and listens to the sound fade into silence. The firelight flickers against her face like unseen dawn. In that moment, Marie Laure understands something profound, that survival is not about sight or strength, but about endurance. She breathes in, counting slowly, and whispers into the darkness, "I am here." The words vanish into the noise, but she says them again, firmer this time. The world outside may be collapsing, but inside her mind, the streets of her father's wooden city still stand. Somewhere, she believes, he walks those streets beside her, whispering directions she cannot hear. And above the burning city, as planes circle like shadows, the blind girl in the attic holds her ground, one small life against the weight of destruction, listening for a signal that has yet to come. Beneath the ruins of St. Malo, the world has collapsed into shadow. The cellar of the Hotel of Bees, once a workshop filled with gears, tools and sunlight filtering through stained glass, is now a tomb of dust and silence. Werner wakes buried in darkness, his body aching, lungs raw from smoke. Every breath tastes of plaster and stone. Somewhere nearby, water drips rhythmically from a broken pipe, echoing through the void. He reaches out and feels the contours of the space, shattered beams, twisted metal, debris pressing down from every side. The weight above him feels infinite, the air close and stale. Somewhere in the blackness he hears movement, the deep, labored breathing of Sergeant Volkheimer, his commanding officer and the only other survivor of the collapse. They had come to St. Malo as part of a small German unit, specialists sent to track hidden radio transmissions. Days before, they had moved through the narrow streets searching for resistance signals. The broadcasts were faint, but Werner had followed them obsessively, recognizing frequencies that stirred memories of home, of Jutta, of the voice of a Frenchman who once spoke of light and the human spirit. Then the Allied bombs began to fall, and in an instant the hotel crumbled around them. Now all that remains is the smell of dust and oil, the flicker of pain in Werner's leg, and the faint hum of the damaged radio lying beside him. He crawls toward the noise, hands trembling as he clears away fragments of brick. The radio's casing is bent, but the coil still glows faintly. It's a miracle it survived. He knows the power source won't last long, but it's his only link to the living. Volkheimer shifts nearby, his heavy frame groaning with each breath. "Pfennig," he mutters, his voice muffled and hoarse. "We're buried." The statement feels unnecessary. The truth presses against them from every direction. The sergeant's flashlight died hours ago, leaving them to measure time by the beating of their hearts. Werner checks the radio's battery. The signal sputters, falters, then steadies just enough for static to whisper through the darkness. The sound brings back a flood of memory, the attic of the orphanage, Jutta's pale face illuminated by the dial, their secret joy when the French broadcast began. He remembers the man's voice, patient, warm, explaining the science of sound waves, and how light travels across unimaginable distances. The same science had brought Werner here, to a war that turned knowledge into weaponry. He wonders if the old man's voice still travels somewhere in the air above the rubble, unseen but eternal. Hours stretch like days. The two men ration what little they have, a flask of water, a can of beans crushed in the fall. Volkheimer says little, his mind fixed on endurance. Werner cannot stop thinking. He counts the seconds between explosions overhead, the muffled thunder shaking the debris above them. Once the sergeant tried to dig upward, but the ceiling groaned in protest, sending a rain of dust over their heads. Now they wait, listening. Werner feels the walls closing in. His mind drifts between the present and the past, between the suffocating cellar and the radio signals that once promised freedom. The heat rises. The air grows thinner. Werner lies flat on his back, tracing the memory of constellations on the ceiling he cannot see. He recalls how Jutta used to press her finger to the sky and name each star from memory. He had once promised to return to her, to bring her stories of what he had seen. Now he realizes how little he has to tell, only ruin, loss, and the sound of the dead. He wonders if this is what his old broadcast meant when they spoke of the cost of light, that to see the truth one must first endure the dark. At some point Volkheimer drifts into a heavy sleep, his snores deep and uneven. Werner forces himself to stay awake. He adjusts the radio again, coaxing it back to life. Through the static comes a faint signal, fragile, distant, like a breath on the wind. He leans closer, his pulse quickening. It's a voice. The language is French, the tone calm, almost melodic. He can't make out the words, but something in the rhythm feels familiar. He adjusts the dial, hands shaking, and the voice becomes clearer. It's not a broadcast, it's a person speaking directly into the void. Above him, in the ruins of Rue Vaubourg, Marie Laure is sitting beside her own radio, whispering into the microphone. Werner doesn't know her name, doesn't know that she is blind, doesn't know that she is less than a few hundred meters away. But he recognizes the voice, soft, deliberate, almost childlike. She is reading something, a passage about a stone, about the sea, about light. He closes his eyes and lets her voice fill the darkness. For the first time since the hotel fell, he feels something other than fear. The sound fades in and out, the signal weak but alive. Werner leans closer, pressing the receiver to his ear. Volkheimer stirs beside him but does not wake. The story continues, a myth about a jewel cursed to bring death to those who love its bearer. The words come slowly, each syllable echoing through the rubble like a heartbeat. He doesn't understand why she's broadcasting or to whom, but it feels as though she's speaking only to him. Time ceases to exist. The bombing has moved further east now, only distant rumbles reach them. The cellar is almost silent except for the girl's voice and the soft hiss of static. Werner feels tears sting his eyes. He has spent years tracking enemy transmitters, building devices that destroy rather than connect. Now, beneath the wreckage, a voice from the same invisible frequencies offers him something that feels like salvation. When the transmission ends, the silence returns like a physical weight. Werner keeps the headphones pressed to his ears, unwilling to lose the echo. He imagines the girl sitting somewhere above the ashes, surrounded by fire, reading to no one. Perhaps she too believes she's the last living soul in the city. The thought binds him to her, in a way he cannot explain. The hours drag on. Werner drifts in and out of consciousness, dreaming of corridors filled with light, of Jutta walking along the beach, of the sea stretching endlessly before them. Each time he wakes the darkness feels thicker, yet the echo of that voice lingers. He begins to tap the rhythm of her words against the concrete floor, a small rebellion against despair. Volkheimer eventually wakes and asks if the boy is praying. Werner doesn't answer. He only says, "There's someone alive out there." The sergeant nods, his eyes barely visible in the dimness. "Then listen," he says. "Keep listening." And so Werner does. Through the night, through the endless silence, through the fading battery and the weight of the dead city above, he keeps his ear pressed to the radio. He knows rescue may never come, but the voice he's found, fragile, human, full of life, becomes enough. In the prison below, surrounded by darkness, he discovers what his sister and the old broadcaster tried to teach him all along, that even when the world collapses, the smallest signal can still reach across the void, carrying light no eye can see. Part 3, June 1940. June 1940 brings the slow death of Paris. The air hums with rumors of the German advance long before the soldiers arrive. Bridges clog with carts and wagons, people clutch what they can carry. Daniel Leblanc, locksmith of the Muséum National d'Histoire Naturelle, moves through the chaos with his blind daughter Marie Laure gripping his hand. In his satchel lies a small box from the museum, a stone hidden inside layers of cloth and wax, one of the 4 replicas made to protect the real Sea of Flames. He does not know if he carries the true gem or a decoy, but he guards it as if the fate of the world depends on it. Behind them, Paris is unraveling. Sirens wail, fires rise, and the great city trembles under the first German bombs. They walk for days, following the river and sleeping wherever exhaustion forces them to stop, in fields, under bridges, along roads littered with abandoned suitcases. Marie Laure counts her steps, memorizing the texture of every surface beneath her shoes. The heat is unbearable, the smell of sweat, gasoline and decay fills the air. Around them, refugees move like ghosts, mothers carrying children, men pulling carts of furniture. The world she once navigated with certainty has become foreign, unpredictable. Each day her father grows quieter, his face drawn with fatigue and worry. When she asks where they are going, he tells her, to the sea. To Saint Malo. To Etienne. She repeats the name like a prayer. At last they find shelter in a small chateau outside Évreux. The owners, the Madame and Monsieur Ruel, welcome them as they have welcomed dozens of others fleeing the city. They share bread and soup, their kindness a rare light amid despair. Marie Laure listens to the sounds of the countryside, wind through the trees, cows lowing in the fields, the ticking of a distant clock, and for a brief moment she feels safe. Her father repairs a lock for the family, grateful for the work. In return they offer him a bed and clean clothes. But safety never lasts. The war moves like a shadow. One afternoon planes roar overhead. The sky splits open as bombs fall on a nearby road. Marie Laure clings to her father as the world shakes. Dust and debris fill the air. When the silence returns, the chateau's windows are shattered, and smoke curls above the trees. The next morning they leave again, following the stream of refugees toward the coast. Marie Laure carries her cane and a small rucksack. Her father carries the stone. They walk through villages stripped bare, through fields trampled by the desperate. German patrols appear on the horizon, their trucks rumbling through the roads. The Leblancs hide in barns during the day and move at night, guided by Daniel's steady voice and Marie Laure's listening ears. Hunger gnaws at them, but Daniel will not stop until they reach his uncle's home. At one point Marie Laure hears the sea, faint, distant but unmistakable, and it fills her with strength. When at last they reach the walls of Saint Malo, the air smells of salt and fish, and the cries of gulls echo across the sky. Saint Malo feels ancient and impenetrable, its narrow streets and stone walls rising from the tide. Etienne Leblanc, Daniel's great-uncle, greets them with trembling hands. He is pale and frail, his heart weakened by the Great War. His house at number 4 Rue Vaubourg towers over the street, full of stairways and shadows. To Marie Laure it feels alive, every floorboard creaking like a whisper, every door breathing. Etienne lives alone, haunted by memories of the trenches and by the loss of his brother Henry, Marie Laure's grandfather. Yet his voice is kind, and he marvels at his niece's bravery. Daniel wastes no time making the house safe. He inspects every lock, reinforces the windows and measures each room. In the attic he finds a dusty radio set, once used by Etienne and Henry for their beloved science broadcasts. He cleans it, repairs its circuits, and teaches Marie Laure to turn the dials. The sound of static becomes their evening music. On clear nights they listen to faint voices speaking in code, transmissions from faraway places. Marie Laure learns the rhythm of the sea outside the window, its crashing waves timed like the beating of a heart. Meanwhile, far away in Germany, Werner Pfennig's world hardens into iron. At Schulpforta, the elite Nazi training school, he becomes both a student and a soldier. The grounds are vast and cold, filled with boys drilled into obedience. His intelligence earns him the attention of Hauptmann, a tall, meticulous officer who sees potential in Werner's mind. Hauptmann teaches him advanced mathematics, mechanics, and radio engineering. Together, they build a tracking unit capable of locating illegal transmissions. Werner's gift for problem-solving makes him invaluable, yet he feels a growing unease. Each invention he completes pulls him further from the boy who once repaired radios in an orphanage. At night, the school echoes with cries from punished students. Werner's roommate Frederick, gentle and thoughtful, struggles in silence. He loves birds, collects feathers, and refuses to strike weaker boys during drills. His defiance costs him dearly. He becomes a target of the instructor's cruelty. Werner tries to protect him, but fear keeps him compliant. He knows what happens to those who resist. When Frederick is beaten nearly to death for refusing an order, Werner feels the last of his innocence crack. He continues his work, his mind divided between loyalty and guilt. Back in St. Malo, the war creeps closer. Soldiers occupy nearby towns. Etienne rarely leaves the house. His fear of open spaces and the sound of planes keeps him inside. Daniel tells Marie Laure stories each evening to distract her from the growing tension, tales of the sea, of invisible light, of bravery. Together, they map every room of the house into a miniature model, just as they once did in Paris. Daniel carves tiny streets, towers and rooftops, and Marie Laure memorizes them by touch. In this way, she learns to navigate St. Malo even as the city grows dangerous. The sea of flames remains hidden. Daniel wraps it in oilcloth, conceals it behind a false panel in Etienne's wardrobe, and tells no one of its location. Yet he senses eyes upon him. Rumors of German patrols reach the town. One morning, soldiers arrive at the house demanding papers. Daniel stands tall, his voice calm, but they search his belongings anyway. When they leave, he knows they will return. That night, he kisses Marie Laure's forehead and tells her to be brave. "You have your mind, your courage, your memory," he says. "That is all anyone needs." Days later, he is arrested. The Germans accuse him of espionage and theft. They march him away while Marie Laure screams his name, her hands reaching into emptiness. The sound of boots fades down the cobblestone street, leaving only the wind and the echo of gulls. Etienne holds her trembling shoulders, whispering that they will survive. She presses her fingers to the walls, trying to memorize the world that remains. The lock her father fixed still clicks perfectly, but his voice is gone. In Paris, Werner's radio work grows more precise. In St. Malo, Marie Laure learns to listen more deeply than ever before. Across the wreckage of Europe, their fates begin to align. Two young lives shaped by sound, silence, and the unseen currents of light that move through the darkening world. The tide rolled endlessly against the walls of St. Malo, whispering beneath the sound of marching boots. In the tall, narrow house on Rue Vaubourg, Marie Laure Leblanc lives in the echo of her father's absence. Days after the soldiers took him away, his workshop still smells faintly of oil and metal, his tools neatly lined as though waiting for his return. Each morning she listens for footsteps on the stairs, but the silence remains unbroken. Etienne, her great-uncle, moves softly through the house like a shadow, his breath shallow, his fear of the outside world keeping him bound within its walls. Yet even in his frailty he begins to find strength in her presence, the quiet resolve of a child who refuses to be broken. Marie Laure's world now revolves around sound. She memorizes the rhythm of waves against stone, the call of gulls, the hum of engines that occasionally pass in the distance. Her fingers trace the wooden streets of the miniature St. Malo her father carved, committing each turn to memory, until she can move through the real city without hesitation. Etienne tells her stories of radio signals, invisible threads connecting people across continents, and she imagines voices floating through the air like light she cannot see. At night he repairs his old transmitter, a relic from the broadcasts he once made with his brother Henry during the Great War. When the machine hums to life, Marie Laure feels as if she can hear the heartbeat of the world again. Outside their door, the Germans settle into occupation. Their boots stamp through the narrow streets, and their voices echo off the stone walls. Curfews are announced, ration lines stretch through the square, and fear becomes as common as bread. Still, life in St. Malo continues in fragments. The baker still opens his shop, fishermen still cast their nets, and from time to time laughter drifts faintly from the cafe. Marie Laure learns to navigate this new rhythm of existence. Each day she walks to the ocean's edge, guided by her cane, collecting seashells that she arranges in patterns only she understands. The sea becomes her teacher, patient and steady, reminding her that everything changes with the tide. Etienne watches her grow braver with each passing week. Slowly, her courage begins to draw him out of his shell. For years he has been a prisoner of his memories, haunted by the battlefield horrors of 1914, the gas, the screams, the sight of his friends dying in the mud. The house became his refuge, its rooms filled with static from the radio that never truly left his mind. But now, with Marie Laure beside him, he begins to open the windows again to let the light in. When she asks about her father, he cannot tell her the truth, that prisoners like Daniel rarely return, so he tells her stories instead, of the stars, of music, of how messages can travel unseen through the air and still reach their destination. Far from the sea, Werner Fennick's world has grown smaller. At Schulpforta, he lives under constant scrutiny, trained to obey without question. His friendship with Frederick, once a source of light, becomes an act of quiet rebellion. Frederick refuses to conform. He keeps his bird book hidden under his mattress, memorizes the names of species, and whispers their Latin names under his breath when no one listens. Werner admires his gentleness, though he fears for him. One morning, when the cadets are ordered to participate in a public beating of a weaker boy, Frederick stands still. "I will not," he says. The silence that follows feels endless. The officers' response is swift and brutal. They beat him until he collapses. Werner watches, frozen, unable to intervene. The guilt becomes his constant companion. Frederick survives, but he will never be the same. His eyes no longer focus, his words come haltingly. Werner visits him in the infirmary, ashamed of his own silence. At night, Werner buries himself in work. Under Hauptmann's supervision, he builds increasingly advanced radio devices, transmitters, receivers, and scanners capable of pinpointing hidden frequencies. He excels because he must, but each invention feels like another step away from the boy who once listened to voices about light and truth. The broadcasts that once inspired him have been silenced. Now he hunts them instead. When Hauptmann praises him, Werner feels nothing but emptiness. He begins to sense that he is becoming part of a vast machine, one that devours individuality and feeds on obedience. In St. Malo, Marie Laure begins to notice the war pressing closer. Soldiers patrol the ramparts and rumors spread through the town, whispers of disappearances, of those who helped the resistance being shot without trial. One afternoon she hears a commotion outside, a German officer shouting, a woman crying. Etienne pulls her away from the window. He knows that fear is how the occupiers control them. Yet beneath that fear small acts of defiance bloom. In hidden corners of St. Malo, people pass coded messages baked into loaves of bread or tucked into fish baskets. Etienne listens to the radio at night, and takes notes in secret. One evening, he transmits a message for the first time in years. The code is simple, hidden in a snippet of music, but it is enough to make his heart race. Marie Laure sits beside him, unaware that she has just witnessed her uncle rejoin the resistance. Werner's path, meanwhile, leads him deeper into complicity. Hauptmann assigns him real missions now, sending him and other cadets to locate illegal radios throughout Germany. He proves efficient and precise, tracking frequencies with almost supernatural accuracy. Each success earns him praise and a promotion, but it also carves another scar inside him. He begins to see the faces of the people he helps destroy, ordinary men and women who dared to transmit hope. Jutta's voice haunts him. She had warned him that knowledge without conscience is a trap. Yet it is too late. The war has already claimed him. For Marie Laure, life narrows to the house, the sea, and the faint hum of Etienne's radio. She learns to move through the rooms as if they are part of her body, the worn carpet, the smell of wood polish, the hollow echo of the stairwell. Each sound becomes a guidepost. Etienne teaches her Morse code. She learns quickly, her fingers tapping against the wood in rhythm. It feels like another language of light, one she can feel rather than see. The city outside grows quieter with each passing month. Even the birds seem fewer. Yet inside the walls of number 4 Rue Vaubourg, a kind of fragile peace endures. That peace shatters when the Germans return for Daniel. Weeks after his arrest, a letter arrives saying he has been transferred to a camp for workers. Etienne knows what that means, but he cannot bring himself to say it aloud. Marie Laure clutches the letter, reading the raised ink with trembling fingers. "He will come back," she says. Etienne does not correct her. Instead, he tells her that her father would want her to keep learning, to keep living. Elsewhere, Werner buries Frederick's broken bird feathers beneath the school's oak tree before his next assignment. He feels the first stirrings of disillusionment, though he hides it well. Hauptmann tells him that service is honor, but Werner has begun to understand that obedience is its own kind of blindness. The house by the sea becomes both sanctuary and prison. Etienne continues his secret broadcast, growing bolder. Marie Laure listens, learning to distinguish the faint notes of danger in the air. The city darkens under curfew. Somewhere far beyond the walls, soldiers march, children cry, and the world tilts toward chaos. Yet inside, the blind girl sits by her window, listening to the rhythm of the waves. In every crash and retreat of the tide, she hears her father's voice reminding her that light, though unseen, is always present. And in Germany, as Werner's machines trace invisible signals through the night, he unknowingly listens to the same frequency that carries Etienne's faint transmissions. Across the expanse of war, two lives draw nearer, bound by the same current, moving toward the same storm, carried by the same unseeable light. Part 4 to 8 August 1944. The day breaks in a dull, bruised light over St. Malo. Smoke drifts from the rooftops, mingling with the salty breath of the sea. The Allied bombardment has not stopped since dawn. Each explosion shakes the city's ancient bones. From the attic of number 4 Rue Vaubourg, Marie Laure Leblanc counts the blasts like heartbeats. Her rations are nearly gone. The small loaf of bread she divided into portions now feels like dust in her mouth. The water jug is half empty, and her throat burns each time she swallows. Still, she forces herself to eat, to live, because she knows her father would have wanted her to keep going. The walls around her groan under the pressure of each hit. Chunks of plaster fall from the ceiling, scattering across the floorboards. She has memorized every sound the house makes: the creak of the beams, the shudder of the windowpanes, the long sigh of the sea beyond the ramparts. They are her compass points, helping her orient herself in the dark. When the bombing pauses for a breath, she listens to the world outside. The air hums faintly, a mixture of fire, wind, and faraway shouting. Then, as if cued by some cruel rhythm, the next wave of shells begins. The city is dying by degrees. Entire streets have been flattened. The sky glows red over the harbor. The fort of La Cite, once a symbol of strength, now burns like a lantern at the edge of the sea. Beneath the earth, Werner Pfennig lies buried in the ruins of the Hotel of Bees. The cellar is a coffin of stone and dust. Volkheimer sits beside him, slumped but alive, conserving his strength. The air is foul and thick, each breath an effort. Werner's ears ring from the explosions overhead. It feels as though the bombs are being dropped directly onto his skull. Hours blur into one another. The world above might as well be another planet. Werner listens to the distant thunder and feels its vibrations ripple through the rubble. His body aches, but his mind clings to the one thing that still connects him to life: the radio. The small device sits beside him, its wires bent and battery nearly dead. He has spent the last few hours coaxing it back to life, tightening screws with trembling fingers. The faint hum of static is his only proof that he's still part of the living world. Volkheimer rouses occasionally, his voice low and rasping. "We'll get out," he mutters, though his tone carries no conviction. Werner says nothing. He focuses on the task in front of him, fixing the radio, searching for a signal, believing that if he can hear another human voice, then rescue is still possible. The static rises, then fades, a ghostly whisper that fills the cellar like breath. He adjusts the dial with the delicacy of a prayer. Above ground, Marie Laure moves cautiously through the attic. The air smells of smoke and burned wood. She feels her way to the small table where Etienne's radio rests. Her hands find the familiar knobs and switches. For hours she has been too afraid to turn it on, afraid that the Germans will detect her signal or that there will be nothing but silence. But now, with the city collapsing around her, silence feels worse than discovery. She presses the switch. The tubes flicker faintly. A low hum rises from the speaker. Relief floods her, the machine still works. She adjusts the dial, listening to the sweep of empty frequencies. Then she finds a channel filled with static. Her fingers tremble as she leans close and speaks. "This is Marie Laure Leblanc," she whispers in French, her voice barely audible over the noise. "I am alive." The words vanish into the air, carried on invisible waves. She does not know if anyone will hear them. She repeats the message, then sits back exhausted. In the cellar, Werner freezes. Through the crackle of the radio, a voice breaks through, faint, trembling, female. He leans forward, straining to hear. The French words reach him like an echo from another world. He adjusts the dial again, careful not to lose her. "I am alive." He hears it clearly this time. The sound of her voice seems to light the darkness around him. He presses his ear closer, heart pounding. For a moment, the bombing above and the stench of dust disappear. There is only that voice, fragile and real. Marie Laure doesn't know why she keeps talking. Perhaps it is to fill the silence, to remind herself that she still exists. She begins to read from one of Etienne's favorite books, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Her voice trembles at first but steadies as the words flow. She reads about Captain Nemo and his submarine, about the sea that hides both beauty and danger. She imagines the sound traveling through the smoke, across the burning streets into the unseen world. Werner listens, barely breathing. The story fills the cellar with warmth, transforming the suffocating darkness into something vast and alive. He doesn't understand every word, but he knows enough. The rhythm of her speech, the pauses, the faint lilt in her tone, they are proof of something human in the ruins. Volkheimer opens his eyes and looks at him, confused. "What is it?" Werner whispers, "A girl. She's reading." The sergeant says nothing more. He closes his eyes again, perhaps listening too. When the broadcast ends, Werner sits motionless, the static whispering in his ears. He knows she's close, perhaps even within the same quarter of the city. The thought ignites something inside him, the need to reach her, to protect her, to make sense of the madness that has consumed them all. For the first time since the hotel fell, hope stirs. Above, the bombs begin again. The explosions are closer now, shaking the entire house. Marie Laure curls into a corner of the attic, clutching the book to her chest. The air quivers with heat. She whispers her name one more time into the radio before turning it off to save the battery. In the silence that follows, she can hear the distant crash of the sea against the ramparts. The rhythm comforts her, the same tide that has always been there, indifferent to war, endless and steady. In the cellar, Werner keeps his hand on the radio's dial, refusing to let go of the faint hum. Around him, the walls moan under the strain of fire. Dust falls from the ceiling, settling on his hair, his lashes, his lips. He imagines the girl in the house above, reading to him through the air, her voice carried by light he cannot see. And though they are separated by rubble, by war, by everything that divides the living and the dying, he listens, as if listening itself were an act of survival. For both of them, the city has become a labyrinth of fire. Yet within its walls, amid the thunder and smoke, two small, unseen lives persist, one sending words into the void, the other catching them, both unaware that the distance between them has already begun to close. Night falls again over St. Malo, though it is hard to tell where the smoke ends and the darkness begins. The air is thick with ash, the streets buried in debris. In the attic of number 4 Rue Vaubourg, Marie Laure sits beside the radio, her head resting against the table, every muscle trembling with fatigue. She has not eaten in 2 days. The bread is gone, the last drops of water cling to the bottom of the jug. Below her, the house creaks as if alive, each sound feeding her fear that it may collapse. Still, she cannot leave. The city outside is a storm of destruction. To open the door would be to step into death itself. So she stays in her small room, clinging to the single lifeline she has left, the voice that might reach someone, anyone, through the waves of air. When the silence grows unbearable, she turns the radio back on. The machine hums, faint but faithful. "This is Marie Laure Leblanc," she whispers again. I am alive. I am trapped at number 4 Rue Vaubourg. Her words tremble as they leave her lips, carried into the ether. She cannot know that beneath the rubble, a boy she has never met is listening. After speaking, she reaches for the book that has become her companion, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. The pages are smudged with soot, the edges rough under her fingers. She opens to where she left off and begins to read aloud, her voice steadying with each sentence. She reads not only to survive but to fill the darkness with something human. In the cellar of the Hotel of Bees, Werner Pfennig stirs at the first sound of her voice. It cuts through the static like light through fog. His body is weak, his mouth dry, but he moves closer to the radio, pressing his ear against the speaker. He recognizes the same soft rhythm as before, the same voice reading from a story that feels ancient and comforting. Volkheimer, half-conscious beside him, stirs and mutters, but Werner doesn't answer. He closes his eyes and lets the sound wash over him. Each word feels like a hand reaching through the rubble. The girl speaks of the ocean, of vastness and mystery, of Captain Nemo's ship gliding silently beneath the waves. Werner imagines her sitting somewhere high above, a candle flickering beside her, her face illuminated by its glow. He imagines her hair tangled with dust, her clothes torn, yet her voice calm and clear. He thinks of Jutta, of the nights they once spent listening to forbidden broadcasts, and he feels the old ache of longing for innocence, for truth, for a world not built on fear. He adjusts the dial carefully, keeping her signal strong, terrified that a wrong touch will lose her. Hours pass like this, the city roaring and burning above them. Each time she stops reading, Werner waits in silence, hoping she will speak again. Sometimes the connection fades, the static swallowing her voice, but then she returns, soft as a prayer. "Can anyone hear me?" she says. "Please, someone." He wants to answer, to speak into the darkness, to tell her he is here, but the rubble traps him. The radio can receive, not transmit. His voice belongs to the stone. In the attic, Marie Laure's strength wanes. The heat from the fires outside seeps through the walls. Sweat gathers at her hairline, dries and returns. Her tongue feels swollen from thirst. Yet she forces herself to continue reading. The act of speaking gives her purpose, something to hold against despair. Between pages she whispers to her father, to Etienne, to anyone who might hear. "I'm not afraid," she tells herself, though she is trembling. "I can still hear the sea." The sound of the waves, faint but steady, comes through the window, the one sound that never leaves her. In the cellar, the bombings grow fainter. The Allies are pushing deeper into the city, gunfire echoes closer. Dust sifts down from the cracks above. Werner crawls toward the stairwell, testing whether the rubble has shifted. The air grows slightly cooler, hinting at a passage. Volkheimer, stirring from exhaustion, helps him move a broken beam. It is futile work, but it keeps them alive. Each movement feels like defiance. When they stop, Werner turns the radio back on. The girl's voice returns, weaker now, barely audible. She is reading slower, as if falling asleep mid-sentence. He leans closer, willing her to keep talking. "Captain Nemo," she murmurs, her voice breaking, "says that life is a storm that will pass. Beneath the calm sea, there is light." Werner repeats the words under his breath. He does not know if she is real anymore, or if his mind is inventing her. But he clings to her voice as the last proof that there is still something beautiful left in the world. He pictures her sitting near an open window, the glow of a candle painting gold across her cheek. He imagines reaching her, climbing out of the ruins, finding her house, knocking on the door. The image feels so vivid it hurts. Outside, the bombing slows. The sky rumbles with distant thunder, but St. Malo is mostly quiet now, its destruction complete. Marie Laure sits slumped against the wall, her head tilted toward the radio, her voice barely a whisper. "Etienne," she breathes, "I think the war is ending." She has no idea how long she's been trapped, hours, maybe days. Her mind drifts between waking and dreams. In one dream, she is back in Paris, walking beside her father, holding his hand as they count steps to the museum. In another, she is floating in the sea, weightless and free. Werner sits in darkness, eyes open, listening. The radio hums softly. The connection weakens, then vanishes altogether. He taps the side of the device, whispers, "Please," as though speaking could bring her back. But the static remains. He leans his head against the wall and closes his eyes. Around him the world smells of dust, iron and ash. He thinks of Jutta's warning, that his gift would bring him both wonder and ruin, and wonders if this is what she meant. Above, the girl sleeps at last, the book slipping from her hand. The candle burns out, and the attic returns to blackness. Only the sound of the sea remains, rising and falling like breath. Below, Werner listens to the silence she leaves behind. He does not know her name, but he knows her story now, the sound of her courage, the calm in her voice, the light she carried through the dark. And though the bombs have stopped and the city lies in ruin, the invisible thread between them holds, two souls still reaching for each other through smoke, through stone, through all the light they cannot see. Part 5, January 1941. Winter settles heavily over St. Malo in 1941. The air tastes of salt and smoke, the streets lined with soldiers in grey uniforms. The once bustling port town has quieted into watchful silence, its people moving carefully, their lives reduced to ration cards and curfews. In the tall house at number 4 Rue Vaubourg, Marie Laure wakes each day to the muted rhythm of war. She listens to the boots of patrols echoing on cobblestone, the clang of the church bell, the cries of gulls circling the ruined harbor. The world beyond her window feels smaller, yet she fills it with memory, her father's laughter, her uncle's stories, the steady pulse of the sea. Etienne, fragile but restless, has begun to fight his fear. For years he has lived inside the walls of his house, a prisoner to the ghosts of the Great War. Now, pushed by the courage of the blind girl who refuses to surrender, he dares to climb the stairs to the attic again. There he dusts off his old transmitter, the one he once used to broadcast lessons on science and music with his brother Henry. The tubes hum faintly when he turns it on. The machine feels like a heartbeat, returning to life. Marie Laure stands beside him, listening to the electric crackle. Together they begin to send messages, their signals disguised as short bursts of coded numbers woven into music. What begins as small acts of defiance becomes their lifeline, proof that they can still reach the outside world. The resistance spreads through St. Malo in whispers. Madame Manic, the housekeeper who has cared for Etienne since before the war, becomes their silent ally. Her laughter fills the house even when the radio signals bring only danger. She organizes women to deliver food and messages, to bake coded notes into loaves of bread. Each errand feels like rebellion. Sometimes she returns home with her cheeks flushed, her eyes alight, saying, "We can do something even if it's small." To Marie Laure, who has learned to move by sound and memory, these small victories become the rhythm of survival. Meanwhile, in Germany, Werner Pfennig's days blur into precision and obedience. The school at Schulpforta has hardened him, kindness is weakness here. Under Hauptmann's guidance, he masters the art of locating hidden transmitters. He calculates wave frequencies, triangulates coordinates, and deciphers interference with machine-like accuracy. Yet each success leaves a hollow taste in his mouth. When he tunes his radio, he still remembers the voice from his childhood, the Frenchman speaking of light and science, and wonders what became of that voice. The memory feels dangerous now, but he cannot let it go. Werner and his unit are sent east, where villages burn and suspicion lingers in every silence. They travel in trucks filled with equipment, tracing faint signals through forests and snow. Each time they find a transmitter, the same sequence unfolds: arrest, punishment, silence. Werner tries to focus on the technical challenge, but the faces of those captured follow him into sleep. In one village he sees a young girl standing at the edge of the road, her white hair glowing against the smoke. The image stays with him long after they leave. It reminds him of Jutta, of the innocence he left behind. Back in St. Malo, life narrows into routine. Marie Laure spends her mornings helping Madame Manic gather supplies, her afternoons walking the short path to the sea. The ocean has become her friend, a living thing that never lies. She feels the tide rise and fall beneath her fingertips, hears the sigh of waves retreating into the deep. Etienne grows braver each day, venturing further into the network of resistance. His broadcasts become more frequent, transmitting not only coded numbers but small messages of hope. Late at night his voice carries across occupied France, invisible yet defiant. "The light," he whispers once into the microphone, "is still alive." Werner, tuning his receiver miles away, begins to pick up similar signals. The codes are faint, almost buried beneath static, but their rhythm catches his attention. He records the numbers mechanically, reporting them to his superiors. Yet something inside him hesitates each time he hears that particular frequency. The pattern feels familiar, the pauses, the cadence, the way it ends with a fragment of song. He doesn't understand why it unsettles him, only that it does. In the house on Rue Vaubourg, the strain of secrecy takes its toll. Madame Manic's health begins to fail. The long walks, the cold nights, and the weight of worry weaken her heart. One evening, she collapses while carrying a basket of bread. Marie Laure and Etienne tend to her as best they can, but the sickness deepens. As she lies in bed, she clasps Marie Laure's hand and whispers, "Don't ever stop being brave." The house feels emptier when her breathing finally stills. For Etienne, her loss is like the return of an old darkness. Yet it also ignites something fierce within him, a need to continue what she started. He climbs to the attic alone that night and turns on the radio. The static fills the room like a storm. Marie Laure, listening from below, hears his voice tremble as he speaks into the microphone. His words are simple, disguised as song lyrics, but they carry the weight of defiance. From that moment on he becomes what the Germans call a ghost, a voice they cannot find but fear. Across the continent, Werner continues to hunt ghosts. His commanders praise his precision, but each success feels heavier. The signals blur in his mind, one frequency among thousands. Still, sometimes, when the night is clear and the static softens, he hears something that sounds less like a target and more like a memory. He leans closer to the radio, as if the air itself were trying to tell him a story. In Saint-Malo, Marie Laure sits by the window, listening to the sea. Etienne's footsteps echo overhead. The house feels alive again, filled with risk, yes, but also with purpose. She whispers to herself the words her father once said, "You can't see light, but you can feel it." The broadcasts continue, crossing the occupied land in invisible threads. And though neither of them knows it, the signals they send and the ones Werner chases are already circling the same air, weaving their two lives closer with every transmission. The year deepens, and with it, the shadow over Saint-Malo thickens. The Germans are everywhere now, on the ramparts in the market squares, patrolling with rifles that gleam under a grey sky. Fear has become part of the air people breathe. Inside the house at number 4 Rue Vaubourg, Marie Laure and Etienne live quietly but not idly. Madame Manic's death has left a silence that neither of them can bear, and so they fill it with purpose. Each evening they climb to the attic to send messages into the air, coded phrases disguised as pieces of poetry, strands of numbers woven into song. Etienne's voice shakes at first, but Marie Laure sits beside him, her hand resting on the table, grounding him. Together they keep the promise they made, to keep the light alive. Outside, the war creeps closer to their doorstep. Soldiers question neighbors, confiscate radios and ransack homes under the pretext of security inspections. Etienne grows cautious, but his courage has hardened into resolve. When the network asks for more, he agrees. Sometimes he hides small packages under the floorboards, sometimes slips messages to fishermen before dawn. Every transmission is an act of rebellion, and every act carries the risk of death. Yet to Etienne, it feels like breathing again after years of silence. For Marie Laure, each broadcast becomes a thread of connection, to her father, to Madame Manic, to the invisible world beyond Saint-Malo. Werner Pfennig's world, meanwhile, is collapsing in a different way. He has left the academy and travels with a small radio detection unit led by Volkheimer, the same stoic sergeant who will one day share his tomb of stone. The unit moves from town to town across occupied France, tracing the faint flicker of illegal transmissions. Werner's equipment is compact but powerful, built from the same principles he learned as a boy. They drive through forests and villages, stopping to set up the antenna, waiting for the briefest signal to betray someone's position. When the readings align, the soldiers follow, and Werner watches another family vanish. Each mission feels like a wound that doesn't bleed but burns. At night, Werner lies awake listening to the static on his own small radio. Sometimes through the noise he hears something that doesn't belong, soft music, a voice reading a story in French. The cadence is familiar, gentle yet defiant. He cannot trace its source, but the sound lingers long after he turns the dial. He tells himself it's nothing, just interference, but deep down he knows it's a signal of another kind, one that stirs something human inside him that the war has tried to erase. In St. Malo, the tension builds. Etienne's broadcasts grow bolder. Marie Laure begins to help in ways she never imagined. She memorizes messages in Morse code, carries small items hidden in her pockets, and learns to sense danger in the tone of footsteps on the street. Her blindness becomes her armor. The soldiers see only a harmless girl, unaware that she is a courier for the resistance. Her courage is quiet but unyielding. She and Etienne are no longer merely surviving, they are fighting in the only way they can, through sound, through light that travels unseen. One evening, Etienne does not come home. Hours pass, and the streets outside fill with the rhythmic stomp of boots. Marie Laure waits in the dark, listening for his voice, for the key in the lock that does not come. When she hears the knock, it's not his. The Germans search the house with cold efficiency, overturning drawers, pulling up floorboards. She stands still, her hands clenched, her cane resting by her side. The diamond, the sea of flames, remains hidden behind the false panel in the wardrobe, untouched. They find nothing. After the soldiers leave, she climbs to the attic and turns on the radio. For the first time, she speaks into it herself. Her voice is soft but steady. Etienne Leblanc has been taken. But the light remains. Far away, Werner listens to the static hum and feels his chest tighten. His latest orders have brought his unit north, closer to Brittany. The signals they intercept are faint but distinctive. One night, the pattern emerges again, those same coded bursts followed by the echo of a melody. The rhythm is unmistakable. The source, according to his equipment, lies somewhere near the sea in a walled city. St. Malo. His commander tells him to prepare. Another transmitter, another target. Werner says nothing, but inside him two worlds begin to collide, the duty he cannot escape and the ghostly voice that feels like hope. Weeks pass. Marie Laure endures alone, rationing food, listening to distant gunfire, waiting for a knock that will either save or destroy her. She continues Etienne's work, sending messages into the night. Sometimes she reads from her books, the sound of her voice steady even when her hands tremble. The neighbors whisper about her bravery, though she hears only the silence left by those who are gone. Each broadcast feels like reaching into darkness, not knowing if anyone will answer. Werner's missions intensify. The unit moves through fields of ruin, through towns reduced to rubble. Each signal they trace brings him closer to St. Malo, closer to the source of the voice that refuses to fade. He begins to dream of her, a girl sitting by a window reading stories to no one. In those dreams the war is far away and the world feels weightless again. But daylight brings orders, and the weight of reality crushes the dream. By the spring of 1944, both are prisoners of their own courage. Marie Laure, blind and defiant, continues to send messages from the attic on Rue Vaubourg. Werner, soldier and listener, follows those same signals across France, not yet knowing that the path he is tracing will lead him to her. The invisible current that connects them hums with increasing strength, an unseen bond forged through loss, courage, and the small miracle of persistence. And as the tide rises outside the walls of St. Malo, the radio's faint signal travels through the air, carrying with it two intertwined destinies, one transmitting light, the other searching for it, both unaware that the storm gathering above them will bring their worlds crashing together. Part 6 to 8 August 1944. The day after the bombing, St. Malo lies in pieces. Smoke veils the horizon, and the sea carries the faint scent of ash. Fires still burn in corners of the ruined city, and the streets are littered with debris, shutters torn off windows, fragments of stone walls, and the twisted remains of iron gates. Somewhere in this wreckage, Marie Laure sits alone in her attic, exhausted but alert, clutching the loaf of bread she has managed to ration. The air is dry and heavy with dust. Her fingers are raw from crawling along the wooden floor, her throat parched. Yet she listens. The silence between explosions has become her world. She measures time not by the clock, but by the pauses between the chaos. Below ground, Werner still breathes, though each inhale feels like a fight. The cellar of the Hotel of Bees has shrunk around him. The air is nearly gone. Volkheimer lies nearby, motionless for long stretches, conserving oxygen. When Werner moves, bits of plaster rain from the ceiling, and the sound of shifting stone reminds him that they are still trapped far below the burning city. The small radio sits beside him, its dial cracked but functioning. Every so often he checks it, not because he expects rescue, but because he needs to hear proof that something still lives above the rubble. When he turns the knob now, the static hums faintly like a pulse. Then suddenly a voice, thin and trembling, breaks through. It is the girl again, reading from a book. The story is about the sea, about a hidden world beneath the surface where beauty persists even when the light above fades. Werner closes his eyes and lets the sound fill the darkness. Each word seems to travel directly to him, crossing the layers of ruin, cutting through fear. Volkheimer stirs, asking if he hears something. Werner nods but does not explain. To speak of it would feel like breaking the fragile spell. Above, Marie Laure's candle flickers weakly beside her. The flame is small, yet she guards it as if it were life itself. She knows that anyone hearing her signal might be enemy or friend. She no longer cares. She reads because it reminds her of who she is, because it is what her father and Etienne would have wanted her to do. The attic feels like a coffin, but her voice turns it into a sanctuary. Between passages she whispers her location softly, praying that someone kind will hear. "Number 4 Rue Vaubourg," she repeats. "Please. I am alive." Outside, the Allied troops advance through the city. The sound of gunfire draws closer, echoing through narrow alleys. The German forces have mostly retreated to the northern ramparts, leaving pockets of resistance scattered like embers. Marie Laure cannot see them, but she feels the vibration of each distant explosion through the floorboards. She imagines soldiers moving from house to house, searching, shouting orders in languages she doesn't understand. Werner struggles to stay awake. The air is thin now, and the thirst in his throat burns. He thinks of Jutta, of the orphanage, of the first time he heard a radio, that strange invisible magic that connected him to worlds he couldn't see. It was light without sight, sound without touch, and it made him believe in something bigger than the war he was born into. The girl's voice brings that belief back even now. He feels an ache in his chest, not of pain but of longing. He must find her. Somehow, if he gets out, he must follow the sound to its source. The bombing stops by nightfall, leaving an eerie stillness. The fires outside have dulled to embers, and the city seems to exhale. Marie Laure's candle finally dies, plunging her into complete darkness. She feels the absence like a physical thing pressing against her. The radio is her only light now, a small steady hum in the silence. She listens to her own breathing, to the faint creak of the house as it settles, and to the sea, always constant beyond the walls. She takes another sip of water, the last one, and whispers, "I will wait." Werner drifts in and out of consciousness. In one dream, he's walking through a field of snow, the air filled with birds. In another, he hears the Frenchman's old broadcasts again, talking about light, how it bends, how it travels even after its source is gone. When he wakes, he cannot tell where the dream ends and the real sound begins. The girl is still reading. Her voice is slower now, weaker but still steady. He leans closer, pressing his ear to the radio as if trying to step into the space her words create. "Captain Nemo," she reads, "says that the sea is everything. It covers 7/10 of the world's surface, its breath pure and healthy. It is a vast desert where man is never lonely, for he feels life stirring on all sides." Werner repeats the words to himself, the language unfamiliar but the meaning clear. Life stirs on all sides. Even here, trapped beneath stone, he feels it, the pulse of something unseen, something enduring. The bombs have stopped, but the city still burns above him. He can smell it, smoke, salt, and the faint sweetness of burning wood. He wonders if she smells it too, if the same air passes between them in this small, dying city. Hours pass. The world above and below remains divided, yet somehow united by sound. In the attic, Marie Laure curls up beside the radio, her strength fading but her will unbroken. In the cellar, Werner holds the receiver like a relic, unwilling to let go. Between them lies St. Malo, ruined, burning alive. The light they share is invisible, a current running through fire and stone. It cannot be seen, but it endures, moving between the living and the dying, between the girl who reads to keep hope alive and the boy who listens to remember what hope is. And as dawn approaches, painting the smoke gray, both remain still, one above, one below, tethered by a thread of sound that neither can see but both can feel, suspended in the breathless space between destruction and the faint, persistent promise of survival. The night stretches long and airless over St. Malo. The sound of distant gunfire has quieted, leaving behind a stillness so heavy it seems to hum. In the attic of number 4 Rue Vaubourg, Marie Laure wakes from a shallow sleep. Her lips are cracked, her throat dry. She can no longer tell how many days she has been trapped. Hunger gnaws at her stomach, but fear keeps her from leaving the safety of the attic. She presses her ear to the radio. The static has grown softer, weaker, as though the machine itself is dying. She adjusts the dial carefully, whispering, "Please, not yet." A low hum answers her, and she exhales. The connection still holds. Down below, under the rubble of the Hotel of Bees, Werner opens his eyes to a narrow band of light trickling through the cracks in the debris. The ceiling above has shifted slightly, not enough to crawl through, but enough to make him believe escape might still be possible. Volkheimer stirs beside him, coughing. His voice is hoarse and faint. "Are they gone?" Werner doesn't answer. He doesn't know if anyone remains above them. He only knows the silence has changed. The bombs have stopped. The city is no longer screaming. Somewhere, through the stone, he hears faint movements, boots perhaps, or wind, or maybe it's his imagination. He checks the radio again. The wires are nearly broken, the battery close to empty. When he switches it on, the sound returns, weak but alive. And then once more her voice. Werner freezes, every muscle tense. The girl is reading again, her voice barely above a whisper, the words halting but determined. "The Nautilus," she says, "moves through a sleeping sea." Her French carries a rhythm that fills the cellar with warmth. The sound is distant but constant, like a heartbeat. Volkheimer listens now too, saying nothing, his face turned toward the sound. Marie Laure reads slowly, her mind drifting between exhaustion and focus. The candle burned out hours ago, the air is stale and hot. The book is heavy in her lap, and her fingers trace the pages automatically. She reads because she must, because it keeps her from falling into panic. Each word she speaks feels like an anchor to the world. "I am alive," she says again, this time as much to herself as to anyone listening. She doesn't know that in the ruins below, someone is clinging to those very words as if they are oxygen. Werner feels tears sting his eyes. He has spent years chasing radio signals, silencing the voices that dared to speak freely, yet this one feels like redemption. The voice reminds him of Jutta, of innocence, of the days when he believed the world could be kind. He looks at Volkheimer and whispers, "She's real." The sergeant nods but does not reply. The faint sound of the girl's breathing between sentences fills the cellar, fragile and human. Werner presses his ear closer, memorizing every tone, every pause. Outside, the city smolders. The streets are unrecognizable, buildings collapsed, fires still flickering in alleyways. The Allied troops move cautiously through the ruins, their boots crunching on shattered glass. They do not know that above their heads, a blind girl reads to an empty frequency, and below their feet, a German soldier listens as if the sound could save him. Marie Laure's strength begins to fade. Her head throbs and her stomach cramps from hunger. She takes a final sip from her water jug. Nothing remains. The radio hums softly beside her. "Papa," she whispers. I'm still here. She imagines her father's voice, calm and sure, telling her which way to turn, where to place her hands. She remembers his promise that light exists even when one cannot see it. She closes her eyes, resting her cheek against the wooden table. Werner cannot stop listening. Every word feels like a map leading him towards something sacred. The voice falters once, twice, then continues quieter still. He leans closer, afraid the signal will vanish. The sound of her breath catches, and he realizes she is crying. It is the most human sound he has heard in years. He whispers back, though she cannot hear him, "You are not alone." His voice disappears into the walls, swallowed by the rubble. Hours pass. Werner uses the last of his strength to push at the broken beams above him. One shifts slightly, revealing a sliver of light. He wedges his shoulder beneath it, pushing again. The pain shoots through his arms, but the wood groans and moves. Volkheimer helps him, their combined weight forcing a small opening. Fresh air seeps through, thin, smoky but clean. Werner drops his tools, gasping. They've made a hole large enough to crawl through. He looks back at the radio, still whispering its quiet hum. "I'm coming," he says softly, though he knows she cannot hear him. He squeezes through the opening, scraping his shoulders against the stone. The hotel above is half collapsed, beams hang like ribs from the ceiling. He crawls toward the faint daylight. When he finally emerges, the sky is gray, the air heavy with smoke. The streets are empty. Every step feels like walking through a dream. Following the faint rhythm of her signal, he makes his way toward the sea. The sounds guide him, the crackle of her transmission, the echo of the ocean, the pulse of her voice when the radio catches it. He moves through alleys filled with ash and broken glass, climbing over debris, searching for the house she mentioned, number 4 Rue Vaubourg. Inside the attic, Marie Laure rests beside the dead radio. Her strength is gone, her voice hoarse from reading. She thinks of Etienne, of Madame Manic, of her father. She imagines them all together, waiting for her somewhere beyond the dark. Then faintly she hears something, not the radio, not the sea, but footsteps on the stairs. Her body stiffens. For a moment she cannot breathe. She waits, every nerve awake. The steps grow louder, closer, until they stop just beyond the door. The thread between them, the voice and the listener, the light and the dark, has led to this single fragile moment. And as the ruined city exhales its smoke into the dawn, the boy who followed a sound through the rubble stands at the threshold of the girl who sent it, each unaware of what awaits on the other side of the door. Part 7, August 1942. The war has swallowed Europe whole by August 1942. Fields that once grew wheat now lie scorched, villages echo with the heavy tread of soldiers, and across the front lines the air hums with the sound of machines. Werner Pfennig travels through this broken landscape with Volkheimer and the small radio detection unit, their orders clear: track illegal transmissions, expose the enemy, and leave no trace. What began as science has turned into pursuit. Each morning Werner checks the instruments, calibrates the antenna, and listens for the faint trembling pulse of forbidden signals. The work is precise and efficient, but beneath the surface of calculation and discipline lies a growing sickness in him, a sense that every frequency he finds ends with someone's death. Their days blend into one another. They sleep in barns, eat when they can, and move from town to town. At night, Werner sits by his radio while Volkheimer cleans his rifle or reads quietly from a battered book. The air smells of mud and diesel, and the silence between them grows heavier with each mission. Sometimes, when the radio hums to life, Werner hears not static but ghosts, fragments of music, soft voices that remind him of home. Each signal is a spark of life in the darkness, and yet his orders demand he extinguish it. In one small village, they discover a transmitter hidden in a barn. The local farmers deny knowing anything about it, but the evidence is undeniable. Werner's calculations lead them straight to it, a simple setup of wires and batteries built by hands desperate to speak to the outside world. The discovery should make him proud, yet when the soldiers drag the old man from his house, his heart sinks. The man's wife cries as they take him away, and Werner stands motionless. He tells himself it's not his fault, he only followed the signal. Still, The sound of the woman's sobbing stays with him long after the radio is silent. In St. Malo, Marie Laure continues to live in the rhythm of occupation. The city remains beautiful in its austerity, its narrow streets filled with the smell of salt and coal smoke, its sea walls standing against the grey waves. She spends her days listening to the tides, memorizing the patterns of sound that mark the hours. Food is scarce and fear walks every street, but her determination hardens. The radio in Etienne's attic remains their beacon. Each night they send coded messages disguised as music, snippets of bark, short bursts of numbers that carry hope through invisible air. Etienne, though older and more fragile, grows stronger in his purpose. His fear of open spaces, once a prison, fades as he realizes how much his courage means to Marie Laure. Madame Ruel the baker becomes their link to the outside world. She passes messages in loaves of bread, smiling even as the Germans patrol the streets nearby. Marie Laure, with her cane and basket, delivers and collects without drawing suspicion. Her blindness is both curse and protection. People underestimate what she can sense. She moves carefully, listening to every footstep, every shift in the wind. Each errand is a risk, yet she never falters. When she returns home, Etienne always waits at the door, relief softening his lined face. "You are extraordinary," he whispers once. She smiles faintly, not needing to see his expression to know what it means. Werner's team moves westward, closer to the coast. The further they go, the more the war feels endless. He begins to dream of Jutta again, her voice echoing from his childhood, "Don't forget who you are." Sometimes he imagines her standing beside him in the dark, watching as he tunes the dial. She doesn't speak in anger but in sorrow. He wonders what she would think of him now, a soldier with hands that find signals leading to death. In France, the resistance grows stronger, and so does the paranoia of the occupiers. Orders arrive for Werner's team to track a particularly dangerous network operating along the coast. The broadcasts are brief and sporadic but filled with precision, a series of mathematical sequences woven into fragments of song. The codes are clever, the transmitter powerful. When Werner first hears the signal, something inside him stirs. The pattern feels hauntingly familiar. He can't explain why, but he leans closer to the radio as if recognizing an old melody from another life. Volkheimer watches him curiously. "You know that voice?" he asks. Werner shakes his head. No, he lies. But he does know something, the rhythm, the subtle hesitation between transmissions. It reminds him of the Frenchman whose broadcasts once filled his childhood nights. The man who spoke about light, about science, about the beauty of the unseen. It's impossible, of course, but the thought won't leave him. Meanwhile, in the house on Rue Vaubourg, Etienne's broadcasts grow bolder. Each message sent feels like a blow struck against the darkness. Marie Laure can feel his fear but also his exhilaration. She sits beside him, listening to the static, her hands clasped tight. "Do you think someone hears us?" she asks. Etienne smiles, his voice quiet but certain. "Someone always hears." She doesn't know that hundreds of miles away, a young German is listening to the same frequency, his heart aching with recognition. The war presses closer to St. Malo. Rumors spread of arrests and disappearances. Soldiers knock on doors without warning. Etienne tells Marie Laure that they must be more careful, that even a whisper can betray them. Still, they continue. To stop would be to surrender, and Marie Laure has never learned to surrender. She reads from her books to steady herself, her voice low and even. Her favorite passage speaks of courage, how it exists not in fearlessness but in endurance. Werner's missions grow crueler. In one village, he sees a child running as the soldiers drag his father away. The boy's cries echo long after they've left. Werner tries to bury the sound, but it clings to him. At night he no longer dreams of equations or stars, he dreams of water and darkness, of a voice calling to him through static. Two lives move in parallel now, one sending out fragments of light, the other following the faint traces of sound. Neither knows the other's name, but the air between them carries their stories. The signals that cross the continent bind them invisibly, two prisoners of the same invisible purpose, one fighting to be heard, the other searching for what was lost. The days grow shorter and the air sharper as Werner's unit moves along the northern coast, chasing the faintest murmurs of rebellion that whisper through their receivers. Every transmission they find brings with it a familiar dread. Werner tunes the equipment carefully, hearing static melt into fragments of music, a few words in French, then silence. Each time he traces the origin, a village burns, a family disappears, and he feels the weight of every vanished voice pressing on his chest. Yet amid the horror, he listens differently now, not as a soldier hunting enemies, but as a soul searching for something human to hold on to. The voices on the radio feel like ghosts. Some are desperate pleas for help, others coded messages pulsing with courage. One night, as the team camps near a river, Werner hears a signal more distinct than any before. It carries a melody that touches a buried part of his memory, the same broadcast cadence that once drifted into his orphanage years ago. He adjusts the dial until the sound sharpens, a man's calm, precise tone reciting numbers. Behind the numbers plays faint music, Debussy or perhaps Ravel. He knows instantly this is not just any transmission. It feels connected to everything he's lost. Volkheimer notices his concentration and says, "We'll find it by morning." Werner nods, but unease knots inside him. In St. Malo, Marie Laure continues her dangerous routine. Each night she climbs the narrow stairs to the attic, feeling her way through darkness until her fingers find the smooth metal of the transmitter. Etienne's health has worsened. His voice trembles now when he reads the coded messages she recites from memory. Sometimes he forgets the sequences altogether, and she gently corrects him. Their lives have become a rhythm of risk, sending signals into a sky filled with listening ears. Marie Laure wonders if anyone hears them, if their words truly reach beyond the city walls. Still she continues, her voice steady. "We must keep the air alive," she says. The danger sharpens. Soldiers begin patrolling the streets more aggressively, searching houses for hidden radios. The Gestapo has grown restless, convinced that St. Malo hides a network of traitors. Etienne and Marie Laure grow quieter, communicating through brief touches and unspoken understanding. They hide the transmitter beneath the floorboards each morning, and retrieve it each night. In these moments, Marie Laure feels closer to her father, to the precision of his movements, to the patience he taught her when she was a child learning the streets of Paris. She imagines him proud of her courage, guiding her steps even now. Werner's team closes in. His instruments trace the mysterious signal to the coast of Brittany. The readings place it somewhere within a small walled town, St. Malo. When he confirms the coordinates, his stomach tightens. The city's name feels charged with something he cannot name. He tries to tell himself it's just another mission, another frequency to silence. But that night, as he lies awake, he hears Jutta's voice in his head. "Don't forget that you are more than the uniform." He dreams of a house by the sea, of a girl's voice rising through static, and when he wakes, the dream feels less like imagination and more like memory waiting to happen. In St. Malo, Etienne's strength falters. His lungs weaken, and one morning he cannot rise from bed. "You must go on without me," he tells Marie Laure, his voice thin as paper. She shakes her head, refusing to accept it. She carries the food to his room, reads to him from Jules Verne, and keeps the radio alive on her own. When the next transmission comes, she sits alone in the attic, her hands trembling as she turns the dials. The act of speaking feels both terrifying and liberating. "This is St. Malo," she says softly in French. The light still burns. She transmits the sequence exactly as Etienne taught her, then shuts off the machine and listens to the silence that follows. Far away, Werner hears her. It's faint, nearly drowned in static, but the rhythm is there, the same pattern he's traced for weeks. He notes the coordinates, but hesitates before reporting them. He knows that if he gives them up, soldiers will come, and the signal, the voice, will be silenced. When Volkheimer asks for confirmation, Werner says the signal is too weak to pinpoint. He lies for the first time since joining the army. Volkheimer studies him but says nothing. The days that follow are marked by dissonance. Werner continues to carry out orders, his mind split between duty and doubt. Each transmission he hears from the St. Malo signal feels like both salvation and torment. The girl's voice returns occasionally, sometimes reading from a book, sometimes only humming softly into the night. He finds himself speaking to her when no one is listening, whispering into the static as if she could hear him. "Keep talking," he says. "Please don't stop." Marie Laure feels the weight of isolation pressing harder as the Germans tighten their grip on the city. Supplies vanish and the air grows colder. Yet each evening she forces herself to climb the stairs, her cane tapping softly against the worn steps. She turns on the transmitter and speaks into the dark. "For those who can hear," she says, "we are here." Her courage grows quieter but deeper, no longer rooted in defiance but in the simple will to exist. Werner's last assignment before St. Malo is a village not far from the coast. They find another transmitter hidden in a schoolhouse. This time the operator is a young boy, no older than 15. When the soldiers drag him out, Werner cannot look at him. The officer shouts, demands answers, then fires. The sound echoes inside Werner's skull long after the body falls. That night he turns off his receiver and stares into the darkness, unable to sleep. He knows then that obedience has hollowed him. Whatever light once guided him has been replaced by the static of war. When his orders come to move toward St. Malo, he feels both dread and recognition. The coordinates on the map match the ones he's been tracing for weeks. The voice he's been hearing, the signal he's been protecting, it all leads there. He doesn't know if the girl still lives, but the thought of her voice keeps him moving forward. And so the path narrows, one voice broadcasting from a house by the sea, one listener following the sound across the ruins of France. Neither knows the other's name, but the connection has already taken hold, fragile, invisible, and unbreakable. Through the air thick with smoke and sorrow, their signals continue to cross, carrying with them the last remnants of mercy in a world consumed by war. Part 8 to 9 August 1944. Morning comes quietly to St. Malo, though the city still burns. Smoke curls over the ramparts, drifting out to sea. The bombardment has slowed but not stopped. The air shivers with each distant explosion. In the attic of number 4 Rue Vaubourg, Marie Laure lies on the floor, too weak to move. Her skin feels feverish, her lips cracked. She has not eaten in days. The candle burned out long ago, leaving her in complete darkness. The only sound she trusts now is the steady murmur of the radio. Its static has become a heartbeat in the silence. She reaches for it, hands trembling, and turns the dial. The faint hum fills the air and she exhales. Below her, the city moans beneath the weight of ruin. Soldiers shout in languages she cannot distinguish. The boom of artillery rolls over the rooftops, followed by the brittle crash of falling stone. She presses her palms over her ears, trying to remember the sea, its rhythm, its endlessness, the way her father once said it could never be destroyed. When the noise subsides, she opens the book that still lies beside her. Her fingers trace the familiar raised dots, 20,000 leagues under the sea. Her voice is barely a whisper as she reads. At Fort National, a small group of prisoners crouch behind iron bars, their bodies thin, their faces pale. Through the cracks in the stone walls, they watch the city burn. The ocean foams against the rocks below, indifferent to the chaos. Among them are soldiers, fishermen, and shopkeepers, all waiting for rescue or death, unsure which will come first. They can hear the bombers circling but cannot see them. Then faintly through the distant echo of explosions a sound threads through the air, a woman's voice, calm, reading a story. None of them know where it comes from, but all turn toward it. Werner walks through this city of ghosts, guided only by that same voice. The signal has led him here, the house by the sea, the one he has traced for weeks through static and smoke. His clothes are torn, his face streaked with soot, but he moves with a kind of quiet determination. The streets are narrow and broken, filled with craters and bodies. The smell of salt and ash clings to everything. When he reaches Rue Vaubourg, he stops before the half-collapsed house. The walls lean inward, the windows blown out, but he can still hear the voice, faint but alive, drifting through the cracks. He steps carefully over the rubble, calling out once in German, then in French, his voice raw. "Hello?" No response. He climbs the stairs, each step groaning beneath his weight. Near the top he finds a locked door. He places his ear against it. The voice is close now, trembling, reading words about the sea, about a world beneath the waves where peace still exists. He knocks softly. "It's all right," he says in French. "I won't hurt you." Inside, Marie Laure freezes. Her heart pounds. She doesn't know if this is rescue or danger. The air smells of smoke and fear. "Who's there?" she whispers. "A friend," he answers. Her hand finds the key. For a moment, she hesitates. The war has taught her that trust can be fatal. But something in the stranger's tone, the exhaustion, the gentleness, makes her turn it. The door creaks open, and light from his flashlight spills into the attic. For the first time in days, she can feel warmth on her face. He stands there, dusty, thin, his uniform torn and bloodstained. She cannot see him, but she senses his stillness, the hesitation of someone who does not belong to either side anymore. Neither speaks. Between them hangs the sound of breathing and the faint hum of the radio. He steps closer, slowly, as if approaching a frightened bird. "You're the one who's been reading," he says quietly. "I heard you." Her mouth opens, but no words come. He kneels, offering her water from his canteen. She drinks, the taste sharp and metallic but glorious. "Thank you," she whispers. Werner looks around the ruined room, the books, the wooden model of the city, the small remnants of a life. "We have to leave," he says. "The city isn't safe." She nods, clutching the radio as if it were a living thing. Together they move toward the stairs, each step careful, the walls trembling with distant thunder. Behind them the attic glows faintly, the last place where her voice reached through darkness and found an answering light. The house groans as they descend, dust falling from the ceiling with every tremor. Werner guides Marie Laure through the debris, his hand firm but gentle around her wrist. Outside the sky is grey and trembling with smoke. The fires that had devoured St. Malo have died down to embers, leaving the air thick and sour. Shells burst faintly in the distance, but for now the city is still. Marie Laure stumbles once, her foot catching on broken glass. Werner steadies her, murmuring in halting French, "Careful." "Almost there." She nods, trusting the voice that guided her out of darkness. When they reach the street, the world looks unrecognizable. The cobblestones are buried in rubble, buildings split open like cracked shells. She smells the salt of the ocean and something sweet and terrible beneath it, the scent of ruin. "Which way?" she asks. Werner hesitates, scanning the horizon. The ramparts are still smoldering, but beyond them, the tide glints faintly under the ash-colored sky. "Toward the sea," he says. "There's a way out through the wall." They move through alleys strewn with fragments of the city's life. A child's shoe, a charred violin, a shattered watch still ticking faintly. The sounds of war have become distant echoes. When they finally reach the edge of the ramparts, they pause. The view is hauntingly beautiful, the sea rising against the rocks, the sun breaking weakly through the smoke. For a moment they stand in silence, two strangers bound by the invisible thread that carried them here. Marie Laure turns toward him. "You heard my voice?" she asks softly. Werner nods. "It kept me alive," he admits. His words surprise even him. He reaches into his pocket and hands her a small wooden house, the model he found on the attic floor, its tiny streets carved with care. "This belongs to you." Her fingers trace its contours, recognizing it instantly. "Papa made it," she whispers. She presses it into his hands again. "You keep it. It's safe with you now." The wind rises, carrying the sound of distant artillery. Werner glances back toward the smoking city. "You must go," he says. "When you reach the gate, follow the wall west. The soldiers are near. You'll find help." She tilts her head, hearing the tremor in his voice. "And you?" "I'll find my way," he says. She wants to thank him, but the words fail. Instead, she reaches out, finding his hand, and squeezes it once, not as a soldier to an enemy, but as one survivor to another. They stand like that for a moment, the sea wind lifting the hair from her face. Werner watches her walk away, her figure small against the vast broken landscape. She moves slowly but surely, guided by the sounds of the waves. When she disappears beyond the smoke, he feels an ache that is both sorrow and peace. He turns back into the ruins, his body heavy with fatigue but his heart strangely light. In a basement near the square, he finds a working radio, its wires tangled, its power weak. He sits beside it, adjusting the frequency until the static clears. Then softly he speaks. His German accent colors the words, "The light is still alive." It is not a transmission for rescue or victory, but a message for whoever might listen, a final act of remembrance. As dawn breaks, the first Allied soldiers enter St. Malo. They move carefully through the rubble, rifles raised. They find the city silent, its streets littered with shadows. By the time they reach the Hotel of Bees, the boy with the radio is gone. Only the faint hum of the transmitter remains, pulsing through the morning air. Out on the road, Marie Laure reaches the fort and hears the sea roaring beside her. She breathes deeply, feeling the cool wind brush her face. Somewhere behind her, the city that was her prison and her home crumbles into history. But in her memory, and in the airwaves that once carried her voice, something endures. The sound of a stranger's kindness. The proof that even in ruin, light finds a way through. Part 9, May 1944. The spring of 1944 arrives with a strange stillness over St. Malo. The sea glitters as it always has, but the city feels suspended, caught between fear and anticipation. In the tall house on Rue Vaubourg, Marie Laure lives in quiet isolation. Etienne has been arrested, and the silence left in his absence feels heavier than the walls themselves. She spends her days pacing the familiar floors, fingers brushing the grooves of the banister, listening to the distant thrum of planes. The Germans have become more vigilant, their boots striking the cobblestones like a metronome of dread. The tide of war is turning, and everyone can sense it. Each morning, Marie Laure climbs to the attic to check the radio. She can't bear to turn it off, even when it offers only static. The resistance network is broken, the voices that once filled the air have gone silent. Still, she listens to the faint hum, to the ocean's rhythm beyond the window, to the heartbeat of a city holding its breath. She keeps a small stash of food hidden behind a loose board, a loaf of bread gone hard, a few cans, a bottle of water she refills at night. Her courage has become routine, worn like a second skin. Every sound outside feels amplified, the scrape of metal, the slam of a door, the shriek of gulls that sound almost human. Far away, Werner marches toward the coast with Volkheimer's unit. His orders are the same: find illegal broadcasts, silence them, and report. Yet something in him has begun to shift. The war has drained color from the world. Every village looks the same, every face lined with hunger. He no longer believes in the triumph his superiors promise. Each intercepted signal now feels like a heartbeat extinguished. Still, he keeps listening. It's the only act that still feels alive. When they stop in a small French village for the night, Werner pulls the radio from his pack and adjusts the dial. He expects static, but instead hears faint piano music. It's French, delicate and melancholic, Debussy's Clair de Lune. The sound freezes him. He has heard this before, in another life, when he was a boy sitting with Jutta in front of their small receiver, dreaming of worlds beyond coal mines and poverty. The same melody had once flowed through the orphanage walls like light. He turns up the volume, his heart pounding. The transmission ends abruptly, but he notes the coordinates. The signal came from somewhere near St. Malo. The following day, his team receives confirmation. Allied forces have landed in Normandy. The front is moving closer each hour. Orders are shouted, papers changed hands, and tension ripples through the ranks. Werner feels the tremor in the machinery of war, a machine that is beginning to falter. He keeps his discovery to himself, unwilling to hand over the coordinates of the voice that plays music through the smoke. In St. Malo, Marie Laure feels the shift too. The air vibrates with an energy she cannot name. Planes pass more frequently now, their engines echoing off the ramparts. She spends long hours reading aloud to herself from Jules Verne, her voice filling the empty house. Sometimes she imagines Etienne hearing her, his spirit drifting through the walls. The sea, she whispers, is an immense desert where man is never alone. The words comfort her, even as she senses danger growing. Food becomes scarcer. One afternoon, she ventures out to the bakery. Madame Ruel's eyes are red-rimmed but kind. She slips a small envelope into Marie Laure's hand with the bread. Inside are numbers written in Etienne's hand, one last transmission. For them, she whispers. When the time comes. Marie Laure nods, tucking it into her pocket. She understands. The war is nearing its breaking point. It's time to send one final message into the air. That night she climbs to the attic, heart pounding. The radio crackles faintly as she switches it on. Her fingers find the familiar sequence, the code she and Etienne once used. The numbers spill out of her lips one by one, clear and steady. When she's finished, she reads a short passage from her book, the same one she always turned to when fear threatened to overwhelm her. The sea is everything, she says softly. Its breath is pure, its vastness a balm. Miles away, in a truck rattling over broken roads, Werner hears her. The voice is faint, wrapped in static but unmistakable. He feels it like a pulse through the machine. Volkheimer glances over, but Werner quickly turns the dial. Just interference, he says. Inside he trembles. It's her, the voice that has followed him through the war, through the ruins, through every sleepless night. He listens for as long as he can before the signal fades. The city grows quieter after that night. Marie Laure feels it in her bones, the waiting, the tension before the storm. Each morning, she opens the window to listen to the sea. The gulls circle closer to shore. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the Allies are advancing. She doesn't know what will come, only that the end feels near. In the evenings, she sits by the radio, whispering to the silence, "I am still here." Her words float out into the invisible dark, carried by the same unseen light that has bound her to a boy who listens without knowing why. The air in St. Malo turns heavy with the scent of smoke and tide. It is early May, and though the streets still look calm, everyone knows the war is closing in. German trucks pass through daily, their engines rumbling like thunder. Marie Laure listens from her window as officers bark orders in sharp German tones. Her courage, once quiet and steady, now burns with a fierce, almost desperate flame. She knows the city will not hold much longer. Each night she returns to the attic and listens. The radio has become more than a machine, it's her only companion. She whispers to it, confides her fears as though speaking to a friend. The sea outside echoes her loneliness, its rhythm unbroken by war. Sometimes, when the static settles, she swears she hears faint music between the frequencies, a ghost of a melody, perhaps from another broadcaster far away. She leans close, her heart quickening, wondering if it's the same boy who once listened. In the countryside, Werner's unit camps in a burned farmhouse. The soldiers move like restless shadows, their morale fractured by endless defeat. Rumors swirl, Allied forces are pushing from the west. Werner feels the truth of it in the air, the way the radio signals grow clearer each night, stronger as the German front collapses. He fixes the damaged receiver by candlelight, determined to listen one more time. When the machine hums to life, the first thing he hears is not a command but a voice reading. A girl's voice. He closes his eyes, stunned. She's still alive. The next transmission comes 2 nights later. The voice is weak, sometimes fading into static, but it continues. She speaks of the sea, of light beneath the waves, of a shell that holds a secret within it. Werner sits in silence, afraid to breathe. Volkheimer watches him, his expression unreadable. "What is it?" he asks. "A girl," Werner answers softly. "Reading." They listen together, 2 weary soldiers on a floor of dust, the war outside momentarily forgotten. In St. Malo, Marie Laure reads from memory now. The book's pages are nearly destroyed, but the words live inside her. She reads to fight the silence, to push against the loneliness that has swallowed her. Even in the darkest depths, she murmurs, light can be found. Sometimes she imagines her father sitting beside her, sometimes Etienne, and sometimes someone she cannot name, a boy listening far away. Werner's compass points him inevitably toward her. His superiors order his unit closer to the coast to intercept enemy signals. He doesn't need to look at the map to know where they're heading. The coordinates match the source he's been following for months, St. Malo. The city's name lodges in his throat. He knows what will happen when they arrive: more destruction, more silence. But he also knows he cannot let that voice vanish. He makes a choice then, quiet but resolute, to find her before the army does. The days leading up to August are a blur of movement. The Allied bombings intensify. Werner and his team dodge explosions, the ground trembling beneath their feet. Each time they stop to rest, he turns on the radio, listening for her. She speaks less often now, but each time her voice returns he feels something like forgiveness moving through the static. He no longer hears orders or noise, only her. On one of those nights, she reads a passage about Captain Nemo gazing upon the ocean floor, where the darkness becomes the cradle of light. Werner writes the words down, folding the paper into his pocket like a talisman. When the order comes to move into St. Malo, he says nothing. The world outside is burning, but the light within him, quiet, fragile, invisible, has begun to lead him home. Part 10, August 12, 1944. St. Malo smoulders under a veil of smoke. The bombardments have stopped, but the city breathes in fragments: cracked walls, scattered glass, doors blown from their hinges. The silence that follows war is not peace, it is a stunned stillness. Werner Pfennig wanders through the wreckage like a ghost. His uniform hangs loose on him, his body weak, his face smeared with soot. The streets are unrecognizable, a maze of fallen beams and burning stone. The sound of the sea feels distant, hidden behind the ruin. Yet somewhere in this labyrinth, he believes she is still alive, the girl whose voice once reached him through the air. He steps over the rubble of the Hotel of Bees, the place that had nearly become his grave. His head aches from hunger and exhaustion, but he moves carefully, guided by instinct and faint traces of memory. In his pocket he carries the small wooden model of the city, her father's creation, delicate even amid destruction. Every time he touches it he feels steadier, as if the object itself still carries her warmth. At Fort National, a few prisoners have survived. They stumble from the fortress into sunlight that feels unreal, their faces pale and hollow. Some have been rescued by Allied soldiers, others left to wander the beach in disbelief. The tide pulls gently at the rocks, washing away the soot of the bombardment. Among them, a young man murmurs that he heard a woman's voice through the noise, a voice reading stories even as the city burned. He says it gave him the will to survive. No one believes him, but he smiles faintly, certain of what he heard. In the heart of the city, Marie Laure LeBlanc sits by the remains of the radio. Her attic has become her refuge and her cage. The last of her food is gone. Her throat is dry, her body trembling with exhaustion. She has stopped reading now, though the book still rests in her lap. Her mind drifts in and out of consciousness, weaving memories of Paris with the sound of the sea beyond the window. Sometimes she hears footsteps and thinks it's her father, sometimes she hears Etienne's soft humming and smiles. But the only true sound that remains is the hum of fire outside, slowly dying. Werner hears faint movement when he reaches the base of the house. He calls softly in French, "Marie Laure?" No answer. He climbs the cracked stairs, the boards creaking beneath him. When he reaches the top, he finds the door to the attic half open. Inside, the air is thick with dust. The girl lies slumped near the table, her hair tangled, her skin pale. For a moment, he thinks she is gone. But then she stirs, her head lifting. "Who's there?" she whispers, her voice barely audible. "It's me," he says quietly, "the one who heard you." He kneels beside her and gives her what remains of his water. She drinks, her hands trembling. The sound of the sea returns faintly to her ears, and with it, awareness. "You came," she murmurs. "Yes," he replies. "We need to leave." He helps her to her feet, guiding her down the stairs, each step slow and cautious. The air outside tastes of salt and ash. She can feel the world shifting beneath her, the weight of death and the fragile pulse of survival intertwined. They walk through the remains of St. Malo together, two strangers bound by sound and silence. When they reach the ramparts, Marie Laure stops. "The sea," she whispers. "I want to hear it." Werner leads her closer until the surf roars around them. The wind lifts the smoke, revealing water glinting silver under the early light. For the first time in years she feels free. She turns her face toward the waves and smiles faintly. "It's beautiful," she says. Werner stands beside her, unable to speak. The world is too broken for words. Together they sit on the cold stones, the sun rising slowly over the horizon. Around them, the city crumbles into quiet. Yet in that silence something sacred lingers, a moment of grace that neither of them can explain. The war still rages beyond the walls, but for now they are only two survivors breathing in the same fragile peace. By the time the Allied soldiers reach the ruins of St. Malo, the fires have mostly died. The streets are littered with the detritus of war: helmets, rifles, broken radios, torn letters. The air smells of salt and iron. Among the rubble, a few German soldiers are found hiding, their weapons long abandoned. Werner is among them, disoriented and exhausted. He is taken prisoner without resistance. He keeps his hands raised and says nothing. In his mind he still hears Marie Laure's voice, as if it continues to read somewhere far beyond reach. The soldiers march him and the others to a temporary camp outside the city. They are given water, bread and silence. The war for all of them is over, though none of them know what to feel. That night, lying under a canvas tent, Werner dreams of light, not bombs or fires but something softer, golden. He dreams of Jutta laughing, of Volkheimer fixing a radio, of Marie Laure's hand in his. The memories fold over each other like waves, the past and present merging. When he wakes, the world feels eerily still. He steps outside and sees the dawn rising over the beach, painting the horizon in pale color. The camp is quiet. The guards are sleeping. The sea beyond glows faintly, endless and calm. Werner walks toward it, his feet sinking into the sand. The air tastes clean, almost kind. For the first time since childhood he feels unafraid. He thinks of the sea of flames, the cursed diamond that brings immortality through suffering, and wonders if the story was ever about a stone at all, or if it was simply about the endurance of light. He reaches the edge of the water and stands there, listening. The sound is the same as the static he once followed, infinite, invisible, alive. The waves break softly at his feet. He closes his eyes and hears Marie Laure's voice once more. The sea is everything. Then the mine explodes. The light consumes everything, and then there is nothing. Days later, Allied soldiers find his body near the shoreline. His eyes are closed, his face peaceful. In his pocket, they discover the small wooden house he carried, the model of St. Malo, its hidden compartment still sealed. They leave it with him, not knowing its meaning. Back in the city, Marie Laure survives. The soldiers find her walking along the ramparts, her clothes covered in ash. She refuses to leave until she's certain Etienne's house still stands. They take her to safety, and for the first time in weeks she eats, drinks and sleeps without fear. The war ends soon after, but the memory of those days never leaves her. She carries it quietly, the way one carries light cupped in their hands. Years pass. The ruins of St. Malo are rebuilt stone by stone. The sea remains unchanged, vast, indifferent, eternal. Marie Laure grows older, but continues to walk the shore whenever she visits. Sometimes she stops and listens to the wind, believing she can still hear the echoes of that night, the faint voice of a boy tuning a radio, the hum of an invisible signal, the music of Clair de Lune drifting through the smoke. In the end, the city returns to life. Children play on the ramparts, fishermen mend their nets, and tourists walk the rebuilt streets. But for those who remember, the war never truly disappears. It lingers in the air, in the silence between waves, in the invisible frequencies that carry the past forward. And though the people who once filled those frequencies are gone, their voices endure. Werner's careful precision, Marie Laure's quiet courage, two lives bound by light they could never see, and by the proof that even through ruin and death the world continues to glow. Part 11 to 1945. The war ends not with a cry but with exhaustion. By 1945 the cities of Europe lie shattered, their people ghosts wandering through rubble. Berlin is a landscape of smoke and dust. Streets are filled with the smell of burnt iron and damp stone. Soldiers, once confident in their uniforms, now look like lost boys. In the center of this ruin, Jutta Pfennig walks with her mother through the remains of what was once home. She is 16, older in spirit than her years, her eyes dulled by what she has seen and heard. They live quietly, scavenging food, watching columns of refugees pass daily. Every building whispers of loss. Every silence feels crowded with memory. From time to time, Jutta hears the name of her brother. Some say he was seen near St. Malo, others claim he died in France. No one knows for certain. She has stopped asking. The war has erased certainty from the world. Still, when she looks at the broken radios scattered through the rubble, she feels the pull of his voice. She remembers how he used to build them, how his fingers moved carefully over copper wires, how he spoke of light as if it were a living thing. In the evenings, when she can find a candle, she lights it and sits by the window. "Where are you, Werner?" she whispers. The light flickers like a signal no one will ever receive. Far from Berlin in Paris, Marie Laure Leblanc walks through the Muséum National de Histoire Naturelle for the first time since the war's end. The building has survived, though the years have left their mark. Dust coats the display cases, and the skeletons of whales and fish gleam under dim light. She moves slowly, her cane tapping gently against the floor, tracing paths she once knew by heart. Her hands find the cold surface of glass, the familiar scent of wood polish and paper. The memories come in waves. Her father's laughter, the echo of his steps in these same corridors the moment they left everything behind. The museum's curator greets her with quiet reverence. He tells her that some of Daniel Leblanc's models still remain, that a few were lost or destroyed. "He was one of our finest," the curator says softly. Marie Laure nods. She feels the truth of it but cannot find words. When he offers to show her what remains of the Sea of Flames, she hesitates. They open a small box on a table. Inside lies a dull grey stone, no longer blue, no longer bright. It looks ordinary, meaningless. "We think it's one of the replicas," he says. She touches it gently, smiling faintly. "Perhaps that's best," she replies. Afterward, she walks along the Seine. The city hums again with life, vendors, children, bicycles, music drifting from open windows. Yet beneath the laughter, she feels the faint ache of what has been lost. She carries her father's compass in her coat pocket, the only thing she has left of him. Each time she turns it in her hand, she feels as if she's holding a heartbeat. At night, when she returns to her small apartment, she opens the window and listens to the distant sounds of radios playing. Somewhere out there, she imagines, someone is still sending signals into the air, proof that even after everything, connection remains. In Berlin, Jutta continues to dream of her brother. One morning, a letter arrives bearing the seal of the Allied occupation. Inside is a message in careful French handwriting. It is from France, from someone named Marie Laure Leblanc. Jutta's hands tremble as she reads the translation. The letter explains that a young man helped her escape from St. Malo before the city fell. He was kind, she writes. He saved her life. The name matches, Werner Pfennig. Jutta presses the page to her chest and begins to weep. She writes back immediately, asking if he lived. The reply comes weeks later. He did not, the letter says simply. But he left behind something that belongs to you. Enclosed is a small wooden model intricately carved, its tiny doors and towers intact. Jutta runs her fingers over it, tracing the delicate craftsmanship. When she opens the base, she finds a small folded piece of paper with numbers and letters, radio frequencies, equations, fragments of a life. It smells faintly of salt. For the first time since the war, she feels the presence of her brother not as a ghost, but as something alive in the world. She places the model by the window. At night, when she listens to the static on the radio, she imagines the frequencies carrying his memory across the dark. In the quiet ruins of Berlin, light begins to return, not in brilliance but in persistence. The years pass. The rubble clears. Europe rebuilds. By the early 1970s, Paris shines again, its streets alive with color and sound. The war has become memory, the old wounds softened by time. Marie Laure is in her 50s now, her hair streaked with grey, her steps measured but sure. She works once more at the museum, cataloguing shells and fossils. The world has moved forward. Radios have given way to televisions, and children no longer whisper about ghosts of war. Yet in quiet moments when the city is still, she feels the past humming beneath everything like a low, constant frequency. She lives alone in a modest apartment near the Luxembourg Gardens. Each morning she walks the same path to work, cane in hand, her other hand brushing the tops of familiar fences and benches. The city feels both changed and unchanged, the voices different, the air the same. Sometimes she visits St. Malo in her mind, the sound of the waves, the smell of smoke and seaweed, the boy's voice calling through the dark. She still dreams of him, not as a soldier but as a listener, the one who found her when the world was falling apart. In 1974, Jutta arrives in France with her teenage son Max. She carries the same wooden model Werner left behind, its surface polished smooth from years of touch. Together, they travel to St. Malo. The rebuilt city glows in sunlight, the walls clean and new. But Jutta can still sense what once happened here, the shadows that linger behind every stone. They walk the ramparts where the sea crashes below. Max runs ahead, his laughter bright against the wind. Jutta stops, eyes closed, breathing in the salt air. "This is where your uncle died," she tells him softly. "He helped someone survive." Later, they find Marie Laure at the museum. She is older than Jutta expected, her face calm, her voice soft. When Jutta introduces herself, Marie Laure smiles gently and reaches for her hands. They speak quietly for hours. Jutta shows her the model. Marie Laure touches it reverently, tracing the carvings as if reacquainting herself with an old friend. They talk of Werner, his kindness, his guilt, his curiosity, the way his mind saw light in everything. "He listened," Marie Laure says. "Even when it was dangerous, he still listened." Tears fill Jutta's eyes. "He was always like that," she whispers. When they part, Jutta leaves the model with her. "He meant it for you," she says. Marie Laure keeps it on her desk. Sometimes she runs her fingers over the tiny doors, remembering how Werner's voice sounded the first time she heard it, careful, uncertain, human. The memory stays with her, a thread of warmth running through the cold machinery of time. Decades later, as Paris grows louder and faster, she retires from the museum. She still takes her evening walks, her cane tapping lightly on the stone. Radios have long since vanished from windowsills, replaced by new machines, but to her the air still hums with invisible life. She believes that the signals never die, that every word and every song ever transmitted still drifts somewhere above, circling the earth endlessly. One night, she sits by her open window, listening to the soft murmur of the city. Somewhere far away she imagines a boy bending over a radio, tuning through static, finding her voice again. She smiles. The city lights blur through her tears, but she feels their warmth on her skin. "We have always been connected," she whispers, "even through all the light we cannot see." Part 12 to 1974. It is 1974, nearly 3 decades after the war ended. St. Malo has been rebuilt, its scars smoothed over by stone and time. The city glows with the rhythm of normal life. Tourists stroll the beaches, cafes spill laughter into the air, and the sea glimmers as though it has forgotten everything it witnessed. Yet for those who remember, memory lives beneath the surface, quiet and persistent. Frank Volkheimer steps off a train in France, his body older, heavier, but his eyes unchanged, haunted by the war that refuses to release him. He carries with him a wooden box and a list of names, the only clues left from the years he has spent searching for answers. His work as a contractor now keeps him among buildings instead of rubble, but the ghosts remain. In his pocket rests Werner Pfennig's old military tag, worn smooth from handling. Werner's voice still echoes in his mind, the boy genius, the one who listened. Volkheimer has come to France to fulfill an unspoken promise, to return what Werner left behind to the people who might still remember him. At a small apartment in Paris, Marie Laure Leblanc rises early each morning. Her life is quiet, structured, peaceful. She works part-time at the Muséum National d'Histoire Naturelle, cataloguing shells and fossils, her fingers moving confidently across each delicate form. She walks home along the same path each evening, the sound of her cane on the pavement steady as a heartbeat. Though the war has receded into history, it lives within her, etched into the folds of memory like braille. The smell of smoke, the crack of bombs, the sound of a boy's voice calling from the dark, these things return to her in dreams. When Volkheimer finds her name on the list, he hesitates. What can one say after 30 years of silence? But duty presses him forward. He knocks on her door one afternoon, and when she opens it, her face lights with quiet recognition. She cannot see him, but she hears something in his voice, a gentleness that time could not erase. "You knew Werner," she says softly. He nods. For a moment, neither speaks. The years fall away, and they stand as survivors of a world that nearly destroyed them. They sit together at her table, sharing tea while sunlight filters through the window. Volkheimer unwraps the box he carries. Inside lies Werner's old field notebook and a small dented radio component. "He saved me," Volkheimer says. "He fixed the transmitter when the hotel collapsed. Without him, I wouldn't be here." His voice trembles and he stops, staring at his hands. Marie Laure listens in silence, her eyes moist but calm. "He saved me too," she whispers. "He found me when no one else could." Volkheimer places the notebook on the table. The pages are yellowed, filled with equations, frequencies, sketches of circuitry. Marie Laure runs her fingers across the paper, feeling the raised lines where Werner's pencil pressed hardest. It's as if she can touch his mind through the markings he left behind. "He was a listener," she says, smiling faintly. "He heard what others couldn't." After Volkheimer leaves, she sits for a long time, holding the notebook in her lap. The city hums outside her window, traffic, footsteps, the laughter of children, but inside time folds in on itself. She can almost hear the faint hum of his radio, the static that once carried her voice to him. The thought fills her with both sadness and gratitude. She places the notebook beside her father's model of St. Malo, their two worlds finally joined on her shelf. That night she walks along the Seine, her cane tapping lightly on the stones. The city is alive with light, yet she feels surrounded by ghosts. The air smells of spring, the river glides silently past, and she imagines Werner walking beside her, listening to the same sounds. She tilts her head toward the sky and wonders if the signals they once sent still drift somewhere above, messages that never stop traveling. The past, she has learned, does not vanish. It hums in the background, always waiting for someone to tune in. As she walks home, she feels the faintest warmth in her chest, a pulse of connection that time could not silence. The light, she realizes, never left them. It only changed form. Later that same year, Jutta Pfennig arrives in St. Malo with her teenage son Max. She carries Werner's photographs, his tag, and the letter Marie Laure once sent after the war. The journey from Germany to France feels like traveling backward through history. The roads are peaceful now, the fields golden and wide, but every mile seems to whisper of all that was lost. When they arrive, the rebuilt city dazzles her, the ramparts gleam, and the sea stretches vast and blue. Yet she cannot look at it without imagining the fire, the bombs, the boy she once called her brother. They stay in a small inn overlooking the harbor. Jutta wakes before dawn and walks the old streets, her footsteps echoing softly. She finds the house at number 4 Rue Vaubourg, its facade repaired, its windows bright. Standing before it, she feels the world collapse into silence. Here, she thinks, he found her. Here his story ended and hers continued. She doesn't go inside, she doesn't need to. The house stands as proof that something beautiful endured. At the museum in Paris, Marie Laure greets her. Decades have weathered them both, but when they meet, the years fall away. Jutta holds out a small envelope. Inside is the photograph of Werner as a boy, smiling beside a radio. "He built this when he was 12, she says. Marie Laure runs her fingers over the picture. "He was already listening," she murmurs. They sit together for hours, sharing stories, filling the empty spaces left by time. Jutta tells her about life after the war, about rebuilding, about raising her son with the hope that he might live free of the shadows they carried. When Max joins them, Marie Laure hands him the wooden model. Your uncle held this, she tells him. He studies it with reverence, turning it over in his hands. It's like a city in miniature, he says. Marie Laure smiles. It's a map of memory, she replies. Every part of it still exists inside us. The boy nods, his eyes full of wonder, and for a moment, both women feel that the circle has closed, that what began in destruction has returned in light. That evening, they walk together along the Seine. The lamps flicker to life, their reflections shimmering across the water. The air smells of rain and old stone. Jutta speaks softly, half to herself. Do you think they knew? Marie Laure tilts her head. Knew what? That they would be remembered. Marie Laure smiles. They didn't need to. They left light behind. After Jutta and Max leave, Marie Laure keeps their photograph on her desk. She continues her quiet work at the museum until retirement, her days filled with catalogues and shells, her nights with the gentle hum of the city. She grows older, her hands slower but her mind sharp. She listens often to the sounds around her, children laughing, the flutter of pigeons, the faint rush of the Seine, and feels the same wonder she once did as a girl in Paris, when her father first taught her to navigate the world by sound. On her final evening in Paris, she walks again along the river. The air glows gold as the sun sets. The city hums softly, full of unseen transmissions, voices, music, memories carried invisibly through the air. She pauses on a bridge, her cane resting at her side, her face turned toward the warmth. The past feels close, not as pain but as presence. She thinks of her father, of Etienne, of the man who found her in the ruins, and of the brother who loved him. The light fades slowly but the sound remains, the steady pulse of life, the hum of the unseen. As she listens, a small smile touches her lips. The light they could not see, she realizes, was never gone. It has only changed frequency, still traveling through the air, connecting every life that ever reached for hope. Part 13 to 2014. It is 2014. Time has softened the sharp edges of history, but its echoes still hum beneath the surface. Paris thrums with life, children shout in playgrounds, buses sigh at corners, and the air carries the same rhythm it always has. Marie Laure Leblanc is in her 90s now. She lives alone in a small apartment not far from the Luxembourg Gardens. Her movements are slower, her steps deliberate, yet her mind remains clear, her hearing sharp. She no longer works at the museum, but her shelves are still lined with shells and stones, each one labeled in Braille. They are fragments of a world she once knew by sound and touch, and though most of those she loved are gone, their voices remain in the air around her, soft, invisible, constant. Technology has changed everything. The radio is gone, replaced by computers and screens. Yet, when Marie Laure's great-nephew visits and hands her a small device, explaining that it can find anything with a click, she smiles faintly. The same old magic, she says. Only faster. Later, when she is alone, she listens to the quiet hum of the world outside, and wonders if the signals she and Etienne once sent are still out there, circling above the earth. Perhaps the air remembers everything, the voices, the stories, the cries for help that once crossed continents. Perhaps nothing truly disappears. On the other side of the years, Jutta Pfennig lives in Berlin. She is grey-haired now, a grandmother herself. Her son Max visits often, bringing his children, who play noisily in the same streets she once walked in silence. In a drawer by her bedside, rests the photograph of Werner, the brother who followed the sound of a voice through the ruins and never returned. She still keeps his frequency notes and his small metal tag, worn thin from years of touch. Sometimes, when she hears a song or the hiss of static between radio stations, she feels him close, as if the signal between them was never really lost. Back in Paris, Marie Laure walks slowly through the park, her cane tapping lightly against the path. The air is full of life, children laughing, pigeons cooing, a fountain whispering nearby. She breathes it all in, the sound painting the world around her. To her, every moment feels like an echo of something eternal, light traveling through time, voices carried across decades. When she reaches the bench she always chooses, she sits and turns her face toward the sun. Its warmth is soft, familiar, endless. She thinks of Saint Malo, of her father and Etienne, of the boy who saved her and the voice that found her in the dark. She thinks of how lives intersect like radio waves, colliding unseen, carrying fragments of each other through the air. Somewhere perhaps those signals still travel, the same light they could not see still shining. The world moves on, yet their stories remain, carried by time, by air, by memory. Invisible, but never lost. This has been the summary of All the Light We Cannot See, summarized by Cellwave Audio and narrated by Archies.